Welcome, everybody. Sorry for being a couple of minutes late. Fashionably late, but also Brandon and I get to chopping it up about ball, and sometimes the clock just gets away from us. Brandon Kane is indeed waiting in the green room, going to join me today. We're going to take a look ahead to mandatory minicamp, which was moved up a week. It actually starts tomorrow and runs through Thursday, if I have my days correct. And we're just going to have a conversation about where this team stands, where we think it's headed. Are there any holes on this roster? Any potential upgrades? Maybe a big name made available today that a bunch of you were talking about. We'll explore that as well. And we'll take all of your questions, comments, takes, all of that coming up next on this version of Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever Podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Here we go. And there he is. Brandon, how you been?
I've been doing great, man. Getting through this off season, and feels like we're just getting closer and closer to that end point, which always makes me happier. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. They say the NFL is 24/7, 365, right? And the league does everything they can possibly do to try to be compelling, even during the down times. But man, it's hard. And this is my first offseason of focusing on this from this standpoint, on a basically a daily basis. And so it just, it's a lot easier when you can just check out for a few days at a time. But I don't know what more the league can do to make July interesting. And
I think they've squeezed that towel for every last drop they can pull out. They've got it down to a science too.
Yeah, June and July are rough. And then the Seahawks make it even worse by moving their mini camp up a week. And so, now we're going to get almost 6 full weeks. Usually camp opens up around the 25th, somewhere around there. They haven't set those dates yet, but it's excruciating. It's refreshing, but it can be a little rough.
Tough to come up with a lot there. Yeah, looking for some breaking news.
Indeed, yeah. Well, let's start there because I want to get your thoughts on the Jair Alexander news today. And the only reason that I even think this is relevant personally is that we've seen this offseason, we've seen the Seahawks kick the tires on a couple of veteran corners, right? They had Shaq Griffin, the old 3rd round pick from years ago in for a visit. They had Rasul Douglas in for a visit. There are likely have been other inquiries that just didn't get publicized. Where do you stand on that position group? Why do you think they were looking at veterans like Douglas and Griffin? Why do you think they haven't signed anyone yet? And does a guy like Alexander, still just 28 years old, even though injuries have robbed him of basically 3 of the last 4 seasons, but when he's played, he's been a highly productive player. He's certainly a name, so the fans are all jiving about this. Where do you stand on the possibility that he might be a fit, if he is at all, and where that position group stands?
Well, I think that you always got to take a look at the nature of your team and what you're trying to build, the fit. You try to take all the way around the cost and build it all in as you can. It's a non-scientific way of going about it, Dan. But I think in this case, you've got to kick the tires on this one pretty thoroughly, all 4 of them at that. And the reasoning would be, first and foremost, the injury situation is what it is, but you leave that to your doctors to explain to you a little bit. If it's a no-go territory or if it's a high-risk territory, that obviously takes him off the board instantaneously. But if he finds himself to be that it is just more nagging small injuries or whatever else could be kind of a little bit at play there, then I think you've got to be interested in this for a couple of reasons. First off, don't think the cost is going to be great. He's not going to be making the contract he made prior. Very well could be a 1-year prove-it deal. It's kind of an interesting place here we find ourselves, Dan, where there's a lot of teams that actually have a lot of money to spend. So it's not your typical time of year where this guy gets released. Nobody's got any cap space. You get him for pennies on the dollar. It's not going to quite work out that way here in how I see it. So there's probably going to have to be a little bit of money, but you could do a 1-year prove a deal at $8 or $9 million. And the Hawks have $31 million plus the Noah Fant deal still looming over the top. So they can do whatever they want to do here if the impetus is there for them to want to do it. Why the corner position? Why have they been kicking the tires? Because you're paper thin at the cornerback position. Woolen is going into also a contract year. Job also going into a contract year. So you also don't have these guys beyond this season. And in Job, you liked how he played, but it wasn't that he lit the world on fire out there. He was solid. He had a couple games. The Atlanta game stood out really well. He, of course, had the interception in Buffalo, which was completely legit. But he also had some moments where teams could kind of pick on him. And you look at this defense right now, the real burrowing factor me on trying to push this defense harder is this. Like the LOB days, not that you're going to try to create the LOB, but you're trying to drive the defense and have them be what's kind of carrying the torch at the front of this. The offense has got to do its part. It can't be just holding on for dear life. Special teams has got to come in. You're trying to build the whole team as a whole, but you brought back all starters on your defense. You brought in DeMarcus Lawrence. You brought in Nick Emawari. Uchenna Nwosu comes back into the fold. Adding another cornerback out there to take down what is your probably greatest weakness on that defense, knowing that this defense has got to kind of carry the load for whatever potentiality you want to see from this team this year. That drives me in the corner of saying I'm interested in doing this. I don't think the cost is exorbitant. I think the injury is worrisome, but that's why you pay your doctors all that money to pick, poke, and prod to figure out where he exactly stands. How about yourself?
Yeah, 15 guys back that started at least a game for this defense last year. Tons of continuity there. I'm torn on it. You know, I think my default has become one of, if you have a young guy that you acquired, that you've developed on your roster, that he should be the first choice, right? Unless you just feel like that guy can't give you competitive reps. Got some positive reports talking to Corbin Smith last week about what he saw at OTAs and in the open sessions last week about even Nehemiah Pritchett and how he's playing and how comfortable he looks now in his second year. There's still the question of, with Nick Emmanwori and the role that we project him in, that we assume we're going to see him in, does that free up Devin Witherspoon to play more outside? Does that kind of give you an opportunity to gain sort of at two different spots there? Is that what we want? Do you want him playing full-time outside? These are questions I don't know that I have an answer to right now. And so it is still a fluid position group. And for that reason, I was encouraged that they were looking at the guys that they did. You know, Shaq Griffin, things didn't work out the way he wanted them to in Jacksonville, certainly. But by all accounts, as a rotational corner in Minnesota last year, he played pretty well. He's just a guy, he's never given you the ball production that we want, right? He just doesn't make plays on the ball. But still on the right side of 30. And then Rasul Douglas is a guy that just everywhere he goes, he's solid and he just plays well. Why do you think they've slow played that? And if you had your choice, which veteran do you like the best? Do you think he'd be the best fit?
I like Rasul Douglas because I think that he understands the defense and he's been under McDonald before. So you get him onboarded as sort of the Artie Burns role of the last couple of years as the vet who can fill in a variety of different places. I've always been a little bit more down on Shaq than others. The ball skills are notable. It's not notable just for the fact that he's not going to get you interceptions, but because he's not going to turn his head around and look for the ball. And offenses are going to attack that. It's just the way it rolls. They realize you don't have it and they go after it. Yeah. He's also not the greatest of tacklers. It's not the best part of his game in addition to it. So I don't really would be hesitant on him. I'd more kind of roll with what you got and seeing what maybe opportunity opens up down the road. Because I think corner is one you can attack kind of along the lines. You know, we're on that DJ Reed member at one point, midpoint of the year. You can get some guys in there if you want. It's not the ideal solution here, but I do think you're going to have to reinforce it because as good as Nehemiah Pritchett might be looking in minicamp, he did not look good last year on the field when the ball was live and it was real and he looked over his head. He didn't look like a guy that's a foot away. He looked like a guy that might be a mile away.
Yeah, it's interesting. It will be interesting to see how Alexander's availability now just on the open market after being released, being a free agent, free to sign with anyone will impact, for example, Jalen Ramsey's market, right? We've been hearing for a long time that it's just kind of assumed that the Rams and Ramsey would both like to have a reunion there. But my goodness, that contract that he just signed last September makes things difficult. You'd have to get really, really creative to figure out how that's going to work. I wonder if a team like the Rams pivots now. We can go get Jair Alexander if we feel like he's healthy and he has a chance to play 15, 16, 17 games for us, and we can get him for peanuts on the dollar and not have to worry about being committed to a guy through 2027. Like, I think we'll see some movement there.
He could have an active market, to your point. It does seem like the Rams have just kind of been circling around Ramsey and that it's almost like just a matter of time, almost is the feeling here you get. And I would definitely been on Ramsey as well. He is a different player in a lot of ways than Alexander, much better tackler. More of a guy you probably want to put in man situations where with Alexander, you can do more zone. And of course, this defense is going to lean to playing zone more often. Not that Ramsey can't do that stuff too. He can, but it's just, I'd say where his strengths kind of lie. And you can see last year, Miami was trying to kind of bump him into slot, which is not a way to use Ramsey, in my opinion. It was kind of silly of the Dolphins to try that with him. And part of the reason he wants out of town. Look at the contract. Once it's off the books, once they've bled out the bonus money Miami has and to eat that. And that might mean you have to give up a 3rd round pick to get him back because they're like, look, we're eating this money. Give us a little bit more of a taste of your choice versus where he's at in his age and the career and whatnot. You're actually got him then on a 2-year deal in Ramsey for the next 2 seasons at a relatively reasonable rate. for what he's costing and where the cornerback market is going, because you only have the base amounts basically and some option bonuses on either side, which aren't that much. And this would give you a little bit of a hedge now for the free agency that are coming here with Job and Woolen at the end of the year, where you could find yourself after the season having to find 2 starting outside cornerbacks for a team that you're hoping at that point truly will become a contender the next year, which isn't the greatest of propositions.
Where do you stand on Woolen?
It's complicated. It's really complicated with him. He's as talented as any cornerback in this sport, and it's true talent with true ability in that talent, that it's not some, like, you have to squint your eyes, it's a mirage in the desert, and you just, once you get close to it, it's not anything close to what it looks like far away. No, he's got it in him. He does. He really does. And the tackling in a lot of ways did come forward last year, but then we had a new ailment that popped up, and I call it the getting locked in element. The very thing that McDonald talked about with him as to, for instance, why they had to sit him for Minnesota for the disciplinary issue, or those moments you have at the Green Bay Packer game when it's down to a couple seconds left in half. Keep up over the top. They're going to take a shot over the top. That's all. It's everyone and their mother knows that's what they're going to try to do there. And you left that open. You left that door wide open. And that was not, you had multiple times in that game that the top got taken off on you because you weren't locked in on a rep. Not because you're not fast enough to run with Watson or he made some great move on the route, but you didn't just get it locked in. And you could see that on him in reps. You got a Keon Coleman fade ball out to the corner on one, and he locks it up and rips it up. And he's so busy congratulating himself and doing the rip move through his neck and through his throat. And they come back on the very next play and hit him with the very same route and get a touchdown on it. For a Keon Coleman that wasn't exactly the most dynamic as a rookie last year. So this weird thing is, like, partially the tackling comes a little bit forward. The coverage is great. It's hard to complete balls on him. He's got the ball skills. He'll get his share of picks. But then you've got this now, I got to kind of lock you into year 3. And that's a little disconcerting to me. This definitely puts me out on any kind of giving him an extension in season. I need a full year of him playing locked in, motivated, and him actually realizing that potential, not instead kind of walking through 3 years saying, man, his best year was kind of his rookie season.
Yeah. To this point, it clearly was. And you kind of jumped ahead and grabbed my next question from me, but I saw this comment. I was going to ask you about the possibility of if they really believe in this guy. And it was just a year ago that Leslie Frazier was singing his praises on the Move the Sticks podcast, talking about how they thought he could get to a point in his career where he could travel with number 1 receivers. Remember that? And there was all that stuff from Frazier. It's, I was going to ask you if you thought maybe get ahead of it, save yourself some money, try to extend the guy before the season. Because if he goes out now and has a good year, with all those traits and at his age and just, finishing up his rookie contract, 330 ain't going to get it. So, it's kind of where you're at with Boye Mafe now too, where it's like, we haven't seen enough from some of these young players to be able to justify committing substantial resources to them and banking on the upside, because you're not sure if you're going to get the upside. But if you let it play out, both of these guys could price themselves out of your market if they have big years.
Yeah, they're both kind of separate deals too. I'd say that my reasoning with both of them would be different. It's a great point on your part. I'd ask you this: with the corners in your history that have traveled on defenses, how many of those corners then operated in a defense where they were playing predominantly zone in those travels?
Yeah.
So I love that Woolen's great and man, I love that he can travel, but the nature of the defense you run is really not that way. And zone defenses by and large are not travel defenses with your number 1 cornerback. So he may have the ability to do it. I didn't see them doing a lot of it last year. One guy played to one side of the field, the other guy plays the other side of the field. I didn't see a lot of him staying on number 1 receiver carrying through. So the talk was great, but the way that they played it out wasn't true to it. And it's not true to the way Mike McDonald wants to run his defense, which is to be in zone more than man. If you want to embrace running man and then get the most out of him that way, then great. But I don't think you're going to be willing to do that. And so you're in a lot of ways going, man, this may be a guy that's just better placed into a defense that's going to have him in man a predominant amount of the time and let him roll from that aspect of things. I would lean that way with it. I don't think the savings are going to be that gigantic. If he goes out there and has a 6-7 interception season, he's going to match JC Horn's $25 million per year, because he'll have 17 interceptions through 4 seasons alone. That's enough to get him that contract. So he's going to take a 330 here. That seems a little discounted versus one to the other there, right? I mean, we're talking 425 versus 330 here. That's a pretty big gulf. I think the cost is going to be a lot more in a middle ground between those two numbers if you're signing him now. And to me, I can't do that. I have some worries and concerns with Woolen. I never like to look into a guy's heart or into his brain. but I've also watched a lot of football, and I can tell the difference between guys that are going 100 miles an hour and those guys that sometimes go 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And with Woolen, he will downshift that thing from time to time. And it's like, you're trying to create this hungry, nasty, get after it defense. We're beating everyone's ass, get out of our effing way. And then you got this one part there that's kind of, well, I'm kind of there with that. You need 11 boys that are all hungry, man. You need 11 dogs. You need 11 lions. That's what you're trying to get. And I don't know if I see that in Woolen. I love him though, because I know I'm getting a long answer because partly I really do like him as a player. And as I said, he's as talented as you're going to find in the sport. And the tackling did come forward last year. So it's not this like, well, he's just overrated. No, he's a good player. It's just, does it all fit? How do you feel on that?
Well, and he can tackle. Like I just reminded myself of that the other day. Went back and watched some of his UTSA highlights, and he's coming up and hitting guys. There's tons of reps of him doing that on his tape. Whether it was a shoulder injury his second year, maybe he started shying away after that. I don't know. I am encouraged. I do find encouragement, though, in the fact that as decisive as we saw Mike Macdonald be last year about his personnel, and specifically with the inside linebackers, we saw that. If they had significant concerns that they weren't going to be able to get out of him what they wanted to, as far as style of play and the physicality and just locking in, as you mentioned, I think they make a move with him this offseason. I don't think he's on this roster. And so I do think there's something to be gleaned from that. I don't think that they tolerate that kind of indecisiveness, smart, tough, reliable, right? If they don't think you have a chance to really check those boxes, I don't think they're going to mess around with you on the roster very long. And so I do take some encouragement in that.
It's a good point. And I think that there's definitely, I think some of that too has to do with what's the value you're getting back in return for Woolen and as regards to a trade. And you go, okay, we're getting a late 4th round pick back versus rolling the dice. And maybe maybe he realizes in a year where he's got money on the line this year. He's got 25 million reasons a season right now to be in his best shape, to be at his hungriest, and we get the advantage of that in a final season versus a 4th round pick who we're not going to get a corner anywhere near his talent for the duration of their rookie contract. We're going to get another Nehemiah Pritchett. And I think that's where for them, they did a little bit of that. It wasn't just purely we're still trusting in, I'm kind of getting into in his upside and that this thing is going to hit this real high level. It was as much of all the factors at play. We're not getting the returns back, and as much in that we'll roll this one more season and see where it kind of lands on it, in the same kind of way. I think Maffe's got a little bit of that going on too, but just not for the same reasons. It's a bit, you're waiting for that extra step and the cost of edges and all of that bears into mind along with his impending free agency.
And I'm not so sure that there was that much demand for Riq Woolen out there this offseason, because you would think if other teams were salivating at the traits and the upside and were calling and being aggressive, it was a bad corner draft. It really was. And so if there's tons of teams out there, this is why Jair Alexander is probably going to have a decent market. There's teams out there even after the draft that still need corner, that you look at the depth chart and it just doesn't look that great.
Can we wonder about maybe the fact we're seeing a devaluation? Sorry to interrupt you, but maybe we're seeing a devaluation a little bit, where the cornerback for years had been a value up, right? The value is going up, right, with receivers. But what have we seen the past couple of years? Is the passing attack go down, passing numbers go down, rushing starting to become more important? Does that now start to subtly devalue a little bit of that outside corner position, especially versus where it was even 3-4 years ago? And maybe we're seeing that, because I would have thought a Jair deal would have been done by this point too. You're not going to, you're releasing him outright. You guys couldn't have gotten the 4th rounder at least for that. And I think looking at his base salary for Jair, you're still on the hook for $16 million per on the base salary if you took him on in that contract. And so 4th round pick, $16 million for a guy that's missed half his games for 4 years. It does speak, doesn't it, a little bit to maybe we're seeing that?
It's an evolutionary league. The pendulum is swinging back, definitely. As you said, teams are going to start running the football, being more physical now. That's what they want to do against these lighter boxes. And now then defenses are going to have to adjust to that. And what's the latest evolution defensively in the NFL? It's the Mike Macdonald scheme, right? And variations of it. And we're seeing his coaching tree go off and get coordinator jobs. Whereas what was it 10, 15 years ago? It was the Pete Carroll and Vic Fangio schemes. Are we seeing teams play more zone than man? Maybe that puts less of a premium on guys that can lock people up in press. It's a great point. Yeah, I wouldn't mind if the position got slightly devalued, given the fact that we might have to pay 2 young ones over the next couple of seasons. It would be a good time to see that kind of come our way. Thomas Cox, kind of along that same conversation point. Maybe this kind of answers my earlier question of why haven't they signed one of these veterans? Maybe it's a sign that the Seahawks don't see themselves as being a veteran corner away from being where they want to be, right?
Yeah, I think they look at it as, look, is this guy really upgrading us from where we are in house? We get stability, we get the stable vet. But I think that the Seattle is also understanding, and I believe this right now where you stand with the cap, is that you can go out there and you can get a guy, you can get a league average kind of guy at some position somewhere. You go Wyatt Teller at right guard, or you can go look for a difference maker. And it keeps coming back into my mind here over and over, Dan. And it's kind of Tony Gonzalez's thoughts last year. He was talking about looking at the Seattle roster, and he goes, where are the difference makers? Where are the all pros? We're not the good guy. Boye Mafi's a good player. Not a great player. Yeah. Where are the great players? Because if you're going to be a contender, you got to have some great players somewhere. And so that's where I come back to this piece that we could add, be it a Ramsey Alexander, be it does maybe the Parsons negotiations go south in Dallas? I really wouldn't want to do as much the Hendrickson thing, but looking at a Jadeveon Clowney out there who we know is a purified fit for this McDonald defense. I think you've got to add more. The keywords from Thomas on this: contender. You can be good next year without doing any of the moves. You can be a sub-playoff team. But if you have some intent to try to get to a contending status, we're going to need a move, and it's going to be needing to be more than a Carlos Dunlap for a 7th rounder type thing.
Yeah, right. It's interesting you bring up Clowney. I thought he was probably going to get locked up pretty quick after he was released, although his history is that he does tend to wait. Tennessee was really the first time he jumped on it, but it was his first multi-year offer in a while. You keep hearing back to Baltimore. I thought initially when he was released that maybe the signing of Lawrence would kind of make that a little bit of an illogical fit because their skill sets are a little bit redundant, perhaps. Where do you stand on how Clowney might fit on this roster?
I'm usually very unbiased on just about everything, but this is one where I'm biased. I had a chance to chop it up when he was here before and play some games with him when he was here with us, Seattle, before. So I am not going to be in the mode of I love Jadeveon Clowney's game. I loved him prior to coming here. I won the trade happen before we moved him when he was being franchised by Houston. He was our best player on that defense that year. Double team, triple team throughout that season because we had no other pass rushers. And he had his best year of his career in McDonald's defense. And he did so because McDonald stopped doing what every other dumb defensive coordinator was trying to do, which is that this guy can do everything all over the place. So let's have him do that. Sometimes you just need to fit a guy to a role and let him cut it loose. And so what he did is he let him cut it loose. You're going to operate in that, I call it the wide 10, right? You got the wide 9s, which is where you got your outside linebackers typically standing up. McDonald takes you and bumps you another yard outside. He does it with Derek Hall if you watch Derek Hall closely. And what that does is that gives him an extra step of build-up speed until that point of impact between the tackle and the edge. And when you have a big, long, nasty edge like Jadeveon Clowney, he doesn't need to have a plethora of pass rush moves. He's just got to be violent at the point of impact, and he's going to send that tackle back in the play, and he's going to muck the whole play up. Running back's got to run around this. Quarterback's got to get off that first read now. He just messes a play up. It's not statistically driven, and that's never been Jadeveon's game, but that's what he does, and that's what he did in this defense that was so good because McDonald realized, I'm not going to stand him up in a spinner roll over the damn guard. Why would I do that? He loses leverage every time in that case. That's what so many defensive coordinators do. Stand him up where the guard's standing up, and then the guard gets right up into his big-ass body, and what is he going to do? And so you move him out the edge, let him go crazy. I think this is where you could have a market opportunity too, Dan. Let me see if you buy on this, is that, look, Moff is going to cost you $20, $25 million a year. Maybe he takes that step forward this year, maybe not. But and a Hall in the same way, not bad players, but they could be pieces you could use where you bring in a Clowney. You don't have to trade anything. He ain't going to cost a lot. Ain't going to be a multi-year deal. You then can move one of these extra pieces you have into the market to go and help you out as far as maybe making another supplemental move beyond. Could you do a move of Hall or a Mafe here, pick up a draft capital, move this for a Ramsey, get him, and then get a Clowney in here? Does that look better than what you have right now?
I would argue that I would, if I'm going to add him to this roster, I just want to add him to the roster. They've always carried 5 edges, although last year Travis Gibson never played, but they insisted on carrying him on the active roster. But with injury concerns, you've got DeMarcus Lawrence coming off an injury-filled year. You've got Uchenna Nwosu coming off 2 lost seasons. Don't know if that's just his body breaking down, if they can count on him. Mafe being the last year of his deal, as you mentioned. I'm not sure how they could all coexist, but I've always been a believer in the old Pete Carroll adage that you can never have too many pass rushers, too many edges. And where I think we all agree that we're concerned about the depth on the interior defensive line. One way, especially in this scheme where he likes to move guys around and and try to confuse offenses, and you just don't know who's coming from where and who's dropping, that, maybe you make up for that by, okay, you don't have that extra nose tackle we would all like to have on this roster, so let's add another badass on the edge that can be physical and play with a high motor. And yeah, I'd be down with it, and Seahawks are in a good position. They can afford it, on a 1-year deal. They can absorb that.
And I think you have a hard time selling. You mentioned it, getting the 5 guys to buy in on that, because somebody's losing snaps. Even in the LOB days, you got the prime LOB days, Bruce Irvin, Chris Clemens, Cliff Averill. Those are your main 3. There's some little extra snaps in there for one guy. Bennett's really usually kicking inside. He gets some. You're going to have one guy there, and you have a lot of guys there that are in kind of prove it mode here. Mafe won my new contract. Uchenna Nwosu, he's on the last basically year of his deal. Here as he stands. DeMarcus Lawrence is going to still want to prove that he can do what he does, and so not to mention Hall, who's 2 years away from free agency. So now who you selling that to? Who you getting to buy in on that? And if you can sell it, I'm with you on it. If you can get those guys, but I'm kind of anticipating you're probably going to have some bridge over troubled waters a little bit when it comes to the 5 guys going, wait, all 5 of us? Who's the 5th?
Right. Yeah. Well, they're all good character guys, and they're signed. What are you going to do? Right. Now I will say this, if they hadn't signed DeMarcus Lawrence, I think they would have been, it might have gotten done by now.
Agreed. Yeah, they would have been on
the exact same role, and a lot of the reasons that you went out and you thought you needed to add Lawrence to this roster.
Yeah, I don't think they were anticipating Carolina. I don't think anybody was. Carolina released GD. It wasn't bad for them last year. They could definitely have used him on the defense. It's kind of an odd move by them.
Yeah. Another question from Thomas. We'll jump to a different subject. It's list season, right?
Right.
Rankings season, and I always tell people to hesitate. I think the one he's referring to. Well, now I can't remember the source. With player lists, I always try to caution people, if it comes from PFF, ignore it, because it has nothing to do with how they objectively feel about a player or how they think that player fits into the echelon of the rest of the league. When it comes to their position, they strictly go by their grades. They stick to their grades. I commend them for that. You can disagree with their grades, but that's where those lists come from, right? But we've seen these, right? The best head coaches in the league. And this one came out last week where Mike Macdonald was 23rd. I don't get fired up about these things, but when you see stuff like that, does it elicit any kind of a reaction from you at all?
Well, he's better than 23rd. I think that any coach that comes in as the youngest head coach in the NFL, as a first-time head coach, and gets 10 wins in that first season, I think that that's worthy of being bumped up than bottom 3rd in the league in head coaches. And there's some bad head coaches in this sport. So that's definitely a little bit ridiculous there. But at the same point in time, has he earned his way into top 10 area? No, he's probably in the middle of the road where he stands right now. So, probably should have been 14th, 15th, maybe-ish. First 23rd. So it's a little bit of a push there past where they should have him. But he's definitely, to me, on the rise and doing what he did last year. We don't talk enough about it, probably, quite frankly. It's almost kind of, I think, like he gets the benefit of, Will Carroll was here and he set there was so much foundation here that he was able to operate off of. But this guy inherited all of that defensive personnel from Carroll's scheme. And Carroll's scheme is very different than the way McDonald wants to run his stuff. He's not gotten his guys, quote unquote, to fit to what he wants to run. He's very flexible. He'll utilize the guys in what they do best, but taking this head coach's personnel and utilizing it and getting a better improvement off of that group across the board. I did a show on this, and it was like almost every number when you look at the 3-year period for Coach Carroll defensively, from any number you want to look, from sack percentage, pressure rate, go down the list, all improved in the first season under Mike Macdonald. And that's an outstanding job on his part. Can't be overstated.
Yeah, I was just going to say this exact same thing, but Thomas took the words out of my mouth. Like a rookie head coach winning 10 games with all the problems that team had on offense, and then having to make, having the learning curve on the new defensive scheme, and then getting off to the terrible start, making the changes that they did. I think it's phenomenal. I'm all in on Mike Macdonald. I really do. I think his ceiling is damn near unlimited. And I feel like even now, as much as we can tell from a distance, that just the ownership that he's taken of this organization, and of this team, and the impact that I think he had on the offseason, even, the John Boyle piece from the Senior Bowl, where he's talking to all the scouts and coaches about what they need and what they need to look for, and how tough and physical they need to get. And that it sounds like within that spirit, like he was driving hard to make in support of Zabel as the first pick and wanting that to be part of our identity. And it just seems like he's in total control now of these workouts and what's happening on the practice field there. I just think if the changes on offense take hold, and I've been saying this for a long time, there's so much focus on the quarterback position. I get it. I understand it. And it's not unwarranted, but for this team to reach what I think many of us hope its ceiling is, or even take a step forward this year, they got to run the football. They have to run the football. That's such a big part of the identity he wants to play. And we can talk about defense. In my mind, the defense is fixed. You tweak it here or there. You're going to continue to add to the roster, but almost, set the quarterback play aside. This team has to run the football this year. And if they can't fix that, then I don't know what to tell you.
It's an old formula, but sometimes there's timeless formulas, like the Coca-Cola recipe, right? It's sometimes good because it works and it'll work forever. And that recipe of we're going to have a defense that's going to be locked down and awesome. We're going to commit to running the ball and we're going to run the ball well. And then let's not forget, we're going to play special teams well because we spend as much money on our kicker and our punter as anybody in this sport. Dixon's probably going to get a contract extension for the start of the season, quite frankly. So this is a formula teams have used through decades after decades after decades, through a variety of generations of how the sport and the game was played, and it works in every generation. It just worked 10 years ago. When we ran that team 10 years ago, what did you have? Led with your defense. Russell Wilson was not top 3, top 4 in those first couple of years. He was a really good quarterback, top 10. And that's what we're trying to get kind of out of the quarterback position right now. But you committed to run the ball and you played great special teams. So this is a formula that just 10 years ago got you to back-to-back Super Bowls. I agree with you entirely. I'm not as really wrapped up in the quarterback position because you've taken a purposeful approach of not making this the way that this has to go. It's one thing if you lead with the quarterback and you're like Chicago with Caleb Williams, and it's all about you. It's all about you. Be the superhero. Put the cape on. Here we go. It's one thing if you're doing that, but this is not what you're trying to really tangibly do. And I love it. And don't you think it's just a great fit for this stadium too, this brand of ball? Play defense, run the ball, play special teams in Absolutely. This kind of stadium we play in with the elements.
Of all the qualities, what's the word I'm looking for? I need a sip of my coffee. Of all the factors that go into trying to explain what's happened to the home crowd the last few years and how it just hasn't been a factor. I've been saying for years now, and I think this hopefully is the season that we see it start to swing back the other way, is if you can't play defense, you can't stop anybody, and teams can drive up and down the field on you, and they keep converting on 3rd and longs. Like, it takes the wind out of your sails because that's where the impact of that crowd is. It's, in the old days when it was really rocking, and by old days, I mean 8 years ago, right? It was, team breaks the huddle or they get into shotgun and he starts barking the signals. They know that's when to get loud, and they impact the game. They make it harder for players to hear the signals. They give the defense that extra, just the little millisecond of a start off the ball, right? To get going towards the quarterback. And I just think, because I've been in that stadium for almost every home game over the last, however many years. And you'll see it week in, week out, the last couple of years in particular, where it starts off great. And you think, okay, this feels electric today. This is different. And then the Green Bay Packers just run up and down the field on you twice and pound the crap out of you running the rock, and the crowd's out. And they check out. And so if you can bring those two elements back, that's when you get the home crowd back in. You have to play that brand of football. Absolutely.
I agree. And you're doing it by design. So you're not lucking your way into it. You're not hoping you fall into it, but you've structured this thing up to try to make this the brand of football you play and how you're going to win games. And I think that just gives it that much more chance for success this season, but I think it's going to work well. I agree with you on the crowd too. Got to bring them back into it. The best way to do that is to get a defense that actually can shut people down again and reward them for screaming, as opposed to, start at the 20-yard line. First down. Okay. 3rd down here. They're to the 40-yard line. Okay. 3rd down here. Geez, they're in field goal range. Okay. 3rd down here. So it's, it would be nice to be on the other end of that scale. It's hard when those games, we had a lot of them in recent years with defense just slowly getting bled up the field, and maybe didn't break, but it did a heavy amount of bending.
Yeah, there's a number of things that I could point to when I look ahead to the season, where I could speculate and say, okay, this is something I want to hear at some point during this year that lets me know that we're on the right track. We're headed to where we want to be, to where this team can maybe in 2026 look forward to being a contender. And one of those is at some point, one of the 8 home games this year in the post-mortem after the game, we need to hear an opposing coach or player talk about how difficult it was. Like we have.
I hope so. I mean, Dan, I'd love to hear your optimism on it. I do, because when I look at that Buffalo game and you're in first place, you mentioned earlier it pittering out, that Buffalo game, yeah, you gave up a lot of yards but that was also a full house of Buffalo fans for where you're in first place. And that was a real, for me, head scratcher moment of last year where you go, I get it if we're bad. Everyone's telling me when I bring up this, well, if they could just be better, they just gave us a reason. If they just gave us and it's like, well, they're giving you a reason and you're still selling your tickets to all these Buffalo fans. And I hope that they're taking steps now to kind of alleviate this and get that out of the stadium too. But that's what's really got to happen as much as everything is. I think, yeah, you're right about stopping offenses, but this team, the NFL has got to find a way to kind of stop this. And I don't know how they can do it, because the only other inverse of this is essentially that you've got to go without selling tickets. You've got to risk having tickets not get sold. That's kind of the downward stream of this one. And the NFL wants things sold out. They don't want blackout days coming back into play.
Yeah, and you can't ever completely take away the opportunity for visiting fans to travel and go see their team. We benefit from it too. The Seahawks have traveled as well as any team in years. And how many times have we been watching an away game and it sounds like a home game? So it goes both ways. You can't and you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. I do think it's a combination of factors though. I do like some of the policy changes, how they're going to focus on any accounts that exclusively sell their tickets every single week. They're going to lose their tickets. They'll get a chance to explain it, though, in case it is a legitimate, like someone's health issues or they got called away, they had to leave the country for a year because of their job, whatever. They'll get an opportunity to explain it. But all these accounts that are either owned by ticket brokers, which everyone denies, but is 100% is happening. 100%. And then these corporations that buy the tickets because they're very expensive, and especially the ones down in the club seats, which is where you see most of the visiting fans, because those are the ones that are available, where they aren't passionate about the game. They own the tickets as an asset and they just sell them all. And so we start to weed that out. But also I would argue that there have been plenty of games in recent history where I'd show up on game day and I look around the stadium and I think, man, there's a lot of opposing jerseys here, but you don't hear them because we get off to a fast start and we play good football and we keep them quiet. And so I know it's there isn't a simple answer for this, but I think it's a combination of all those factors.
No easy answer, like you said, on this. Nobody's going to have well, just do this and it's simple and easy. There's a lot at play here that's understandable why it makes it a little bit kinked up a bit as far as an issue goes. Yeah.
Let's talk about the offense. And what I'm struggling with, even though I try to look at how New Orleans built their roster and how Minnesota did when Kubiak was there, but its usage we're expecting it to be so much different this year. He uses 2 backs more often. He uses 12 and 13 personnel more often. He uses 3 wide receiver sets less often. So when it comes to constructing the roster, we have to account for a fullback now. Where do you sit with, I mean, usually the Seahawks historically begin the season with 6 wide receivers on the 53. I don't know if they can do that this year. They'll go with only 3 running backs on the roster. Can you afford to do that with the talent we have in that room and not wanting to let guys get away and wanting to protect guys? Where do you sit on how you see some of the roster allocation happening over on that side of the ball?
It tends to be, if you're going to do the fullback, that the pull's not going to come from receiver, but will come from tight end. So historically, it's been instead of running with 3 tight ends, you'll go to 2. And I would anticipate then you use at times Oots as sort of your third tight end when you want to run the 3 tight end looks. You do mention, and this is where you love this about this team, we talked about the defense being a shutdown defense, right? And how well this kind of works in the modern era where offenses are starting to struggle now, finds consistency, but also within offenses struggling. I lost my point there. I was just thinking about, within that, you've got like the kickoff rule, for instance, right? Where now ball gets down at the 35-yard line. Those bend but don't break defenses are going to be punished by that new rule change, right? Those defenses that want to stop teams instantaneously aren't. Because if I'm a bend but don't break, I give up a couple first downs, they're in field goal range. If I'm a stop you down defense, then I'm getting you to punt. So it's a big difference there. Whereas 10 years ago, right, you're down at the 20-yard line, a couple first downs, you're at the 40-yard line, you're still punting it over to us. It's a little difference, but it's a big difference. Likewise, offensively, Nate Tice broke this down a couple of days ago, former son, of course, Mike Tice, former Seahawk, great tight end, breaking down the fact that last year, the NFL had a league high usage rate of 12 personnel over 20%. 20%. And you had an additional 7% in 3 tight end looks and fullback usage on top of that. So over a quarter of the snaps essentially operating from within the 2 tight end, 3 tight end looks with the fullback. And so this is where now we're at the head of that curve rather than being behind that like we've been at times in recent years, to where you're in the front part of where you want to be, where this is going. And why teams are doing it is to put the defenses in the pickle. Because what are you going to do, Dan? I rock 2 tight ends. Are you going base or are you going to your nickel?
Yeah.
And teams tend to go to their nickel. If they go to their nickel, then they have a lighter slot corner out there rather than the heavier linebacker. And now you have more of an opening to be able to run the ball on top of the lighter boxes that you're dealing with because of the cover 2 shell. You move the guy out of the box, that former Cam Chancellor down in the box safety now goes out 12 yards off the ball next to the free safety. Now I have lighter boxes. So those 2 combinations of those 2 elements, I get the slot corner, lighter boxes. I can pound my way through that. I can find some yards. At the very least, I can get the 3 yards, 4 yards in a cloud of dust, right? I may not bust off the big old runs, but I'm going to be able to consistently keep those drives moving because of it.
If you're right, if Robbie Oots were to be the de facto 3rd tight end, and obviously he played tight end, he's converting to fullback, right? And maybe the more time I sit with this, my favorite pick of that entire draft. Like I think that
he's
guy,
fun.
I just love the way he moves, and I think he has a chance to be a really effective player. But man, that's hard to wrap my head around, right? Because we would presume then it's going to be obviously AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo's not going anywhere, right? So do you not see Noah Fant making this team?
Well, I just don't think he's part of the plan in the future. It's definitely possible they could roll with the 3 tight ends. The issue I've had with this is that, and I'm only just reaching to historical norms, so I don't know this for sure. I'm just kind of leaning back. That's how I kind of am informed by my opinion, is that what has teams done in the past, and if they done something to a high degree when they've done it. Not just some teams do it this way, other teams do it that way. When you have teams historically in the past that are going to run with 3 tight ends on a roster, you're going to have 2 inline guys and you're going to have 1 H-back guy. You're not going to have kind of 2 H-back guys. And Noah Fant can kind of do some inline stuff, but my God, you don't want that guy blocking a defensive end heads up. You just don't want to do it. I've seen a lot of dirty tape on the guy over the last couple of years in those moments. You want him off ball, taking on safeties and cornerbacks on when he wants to lay a block down. So you have redundancy there. And then you don't have the inline guy there. So, how are you going to do that now? Is it going to be Noah and it's going to be Arroyo and it's going to be Barner and then you're going to go with Oots? So, and then now you are going to 3 running backs, but you want to run the ball a lot. And running backs tend to get beat up if you're going to use them a lot. We've dealt with that here with the Marshawn Lynch curse for years at times where we can't keep a backfield healthy. Yeah. So I'm making a little bit of a leap of logic here on this, that you're not going to roll with 2 H-backs for an offense that's going to want to put blocking as a centerpiece in what they do. But there's a possibility that they could look at Arroyo as a receiver type too, right? He ends up maybe taking up a receiver.
I was just going to say that maybe they only keep 4 wide receivers, right? Maybe you keep MVS, Torrey Horton, then Kupp and JSN, and Arroyo. Basically, I mean, John Schneider came out and said it after the draft. Like, some of my scouts think this guy can be an X receiver, and that was a little bit hyperbolic, I'm sure. But the point is that he can be dynamic in that pass game and a matchup nightmare. So maybe you do something like that, thinking that, the Derek Youngs and even a Ricky White probably can get through the practice squad. You can elevate them on game day for special teams if you need to. The one guy in that scenario that you're losing, and I talked to Jeff Simmons earlier today about some bubble guys, but that wouldn't bode well for Jake Bobo being on the 53-man roster, because he's a guy that I don't think, if he doesn't make the roster solidly, you're losing him. You're not getting him through waivers, because Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll are going to be right there, and he's going to be a Raider. So, and not that I think that would be a transformative loss for the roster, but that's just one of the risks of cutting back on a position group, right? And running backs the same way. Like, we like all those guys, right?
Question for you with this Fant thing.
Can't keep them all.
Yeah, I think your points are right on that. I don't want to push back on that. And look, Bobo's a guy I like a lot, but did have a little bit of a backward step year last year, both as a blocker and as a pass catcher. He had a couple opportunities with DK out there a little bit and just didn't really seize those as much as you'd like. And I think that he's on the outside looking in here. But let's look at this from another standpoint. We have a guy like Jai Alexander on the open market right now. Okay, so what would you rather have, Dan? I mean, if the cost is going to be the same on a prove deal, or let's say it's $3 million more for Jai Alexander, a 1-year, $11 million deal. You save $8.5 million by moving off Fant. Which would you rather have? Noah Fant on this roster right now or Jai Alexander?
No, Alexander. I think he contribute more significantly to winning football games in 2025.
And that's what this really comes down to, is kind of the exclamation point why I see them moving off Noah, is all of those things we just mentioned on the head of the stack of this. And then you have $8.5 million. Can this be used in a better place? Not just Alexander, but can it be used to a better player? And it's a substantial amount of money.
It just seems like, I mean, I've been positive, I think, about the process this offseason. Like, I think, some of the stuff, they got some curveballs. There were some things they weren't anticipating. I thought the way they pivoted from it all and reacted to it all, I think the process this offseason made as much sense to me and looked as clear and aligned as I've seen in many offseasons. I really liked everything about it. But if Noah Fant isn't a lock to make this roster, then I question what the approach was there. Because I think even though it was a deep tight end draft, I think you could have potentially found a taker or release him and just don't. It was a significant cap savings by releasing him. And without a lot of dead money, I don't understand why you keep him around if he's even.
I've got a couple reasons.
A bubble player.
I got a couple reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, you mentioned strong draft tight ends. You're not going to get anything back for a tight end at that point. Kyle Pitts seems like he's kind of quasi on the market right now. Atlanta can't find really any takers based on what I've kind of read.
Johnny Smith.
So you're not getting anything back. You're getting zero back in returns. Elijah Arroyo comes in with a lot of injury concerns.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Man got even injured at the Senior Bowl. So if you don't save anything extra by releasing him early, and it's a little cold-blooded, Dan, I'm going to say this, it's cold-blooded, but it is what it is. It's kind of in the team's best interest then to just sort of let's make sure Arroyo gets through here into training camp and he's going and he's fine. Yep. And then maybe at that point, on top of then you have the potentiality of another team out there. Didn't we just have a tight end somewhere who just got injured somewhere in the league? I forget. Yeah, somebody, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you're also going to be sitting there ready to strike if a team has a guy go down or they've got to move or whatever. And now you can get the trade capital back in return for him rather than just giving him up because you decided, well, we might as well just give him. So I can kind of see there's some reasons here supplementally wise why it might make sense to kind of ride this. It's cold-blooded.
And the money, like anyone who would have been interested in trading for Noah Fant would have had to have liked him so much that they would have wanted to tack on a year or two because it just wouldn't have made sense. Somebody in the comments said, now it's past June 1st. You can say it's the last year of a 2-year deal. There's no benefit to.
Well, that's it. And that's why you couldn't June 1st him because he only had 1 year left on the deal. So there was no post June 1st to split the money up into 2 seasons on the dead money hit. It was always going to be down to that significant. All of it was going to hit at once, no matter what you did trade or release and on any of the timing of it.
Here's one for you. What's the strongest position group on the roster?
Oh, it's a great question. Probably. Well, I mean, safety's pretty good right now. You're 3 deep there. But I would probably say overall, your defensive line is the one you got to look at. You're stacked 4 deep on your edges. Leonard Williams is coming off very close to at least being in the discussion for Defensive Player of the Year. Byron Murphy is still very dynamic down there and what he's going to offer. Jaron Reed had one of his stronger years quietly of his career down in there, and he comes back. So I think that especially if Riley Mills can offer anything on top of it, you've got a hell of a line there, depth and strength at the top of it. How about you?
No, if you count edges as a defensive line group, then yeah, I still, man, I think we're going to be talking all next offseason about interior defensive line again. I still really wanted them to add one in this draft and maybe they consider Riley Mills that guy, but I think we know what I'm talking about, right? Everybody wants more of a nose tackle, a young guy, right? They bring Hankins back. He looked like, I keep using this analogy, but he looked like that power hitter last year that just lost a little bit of bat speed, and so he just doesn't have the pop that he used to. And usually with guys like that, when they lose it, it's just gone overnight. It's not a gradual decline. It's like, they're just done. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe he can still contribute and it's just an early down role anyway, but man, it would just be, especially given that it was such a deep draft for bigger interior defensive linemen this year after a couple of drafts where that position was really barren. Really wanted them to add one of those guys to play next to Byron Murphy, kind of moving forward, a guy that we could look ahead to, okay, we have this duo, right? And that guy can take some pressure off him. I mean, I like what I see from Riley Mills. Super encouraged that it sounds like he's ahead of schedule and that Schneider was being a little overly, maybe purposely pessimistic after he was drafted that he wouldn't be ready until midseason. Sounds like there's a shot that he could be ready during training camp at some point, which certainly will make life interesting for guys like Mike Morris.
He's on the outside looking in, I think.
Yeah,
To your point, though, when you look at this, go back to the Buddy Ryan defense, go back through the durations of the Baltimore Ravens defense. This defense has tended to have two really good nose tackles going on. And if not on the field at the same time, where Sam Adams and Tony Saraguchi could both kind of, I think that was his name, was both those guys could do kind of one tech things at the same time, take up a lot of space.
Or they had Michael Pierce and they had another guy.
Travis Jones.
Yep. They were both.
And those, and both really good, both good. So you are missing that element a little bit right now in this defense. And that does, I'm with you. That worries me and concerns me coming off this draft. I had a few guys with my eye on it. You go, okay. We got to get Byron Murphy, especially out of the nose tackle role.
But then the 49ers just drafted them all.
They did go heavy, man. They went, we're going to stop the run. 3 of their high picks are all based around stopping the run. And this just goes to that trend of this is where the NFL is going right now. You can see it in a variety of teams. You can see it last year in the Rams spending the money they did in free agency and building up the 1,000 pounds of interior offensive wall that they did to create those A and B gap runs. Because it is also power runs.
Yeah. Huh? McVay totally changing his run scheme.
100%. Yeah, it's back to this power because you have the light box and you'll get the 3 tech and the 1 tech, but then you have 2 wide 9s. So the wide 9s, you typically would have those guys as defensive ends, heads up over or maybe to the outside shoulder of the offensive lineman, but now they're another foot on the outside. But the defensive tackles are playing it like 4-3 defense style where they're aligned. So there's these natural crevices there, especially when you're running the duo blocks or the combo blocks at the point of attack on A and B gap runs, where it's hard to not get some good, just natural movement in there, just in general terms, as long as you got the beef that can do it. Because of course you can't have a super light offensive line and 2 light guys that are 285 trying to do it at the point that they may not be as successful as the guys 320, 330, which we're seeing more of those guys kind of brought into this old scheme now doing that.
Yeah. Hold that thought about the 49ers because I want to finish up with your thoughts on the rest of the division. Let's do this one. We talked a little bit about some of the corners. Are there any other free agents, any other veterans that are still out there that we haven't named that you think would be worth exploring that might help this roster?
Maybe Gilmore, but man, he's old. I mean, he's really up there at this point, 34 years old. But I've looked through the list pretty deeply, and there's really not anybody at this point. I would probably more be in favor of wait through training camp, try make a training camp trade. The nice part about cornerback is that is one you can kind of bring in and get them acclimated pretty fast. It doesn't have to tend to be one where there's a lot. I know the scheme's a little complicated, but you can maybe wait a little bit on it. But I'd tend to wait. Or Douglas, is just fall back to Douglas, who knows the scheme and could come in. But I would probably try to hold off if I could with what's available, unless it's one of these guys we've talked about.
I think what you just said applies to nose tackle too. In fact, the Seahawks, even predating Mike McDonald, have a long history of signing veteran interior defensive linemen nose tackles late in the process, right before training camp, right? Like Tony McDaniel and Al Woods was in that category, and there's some others that are escaping me, but those guys tend to be available, those veteran stopgaps at least, or young guys that just, teams are trying to sneak through the practice squad and might be able to poach, especially given this year's draft. There might be some more of those guys available. So
you never know. I wanted to ask you we didn't cover a little bit, but the Milroe thing, where were you at on the Milroe selection? Because I know you went to the Senior Bowl and got to see him. We talked a little bit about him with your experience seeing him in the Senior Bowl. Where do you stand on that?
The whole gamut of emotions. It definitely a roller coaster. I mean, I went from, during the season when it looked like maybe he would come out, although I was one of those who I thought he should have gone back for another year. I thought he could really use another year of development, especially in the same scheme with Kalen DeBoer. And now he would have had a year to play under Ryan Grubb in that scheme, right? We saw what that did for Michael Penix. But then I saw him at the Senior Bowl, right? And it was so bad during practice that I thought, in fact, I even said at the time, he's a project and I still love the traits and I can see the upside and the ceiling is immense, but let him be someone else's project. But this was still when Geno Smith was on the roster. There was no Drew Lock. There was no depth at quarterback. And I was certain at that time that quarterback was probably going to be a priority at some point in the draft. And so I was focused more on guys that I thought if they had to play earlier in their career, you could get by with. And so he just didn't check that box for me. But then I saw, then a couple of things happen, right? Then they move off of the 34-year-old quarterback. They go to the 27-year-old quarterback. They bring Drew Lock in. I saw some advancements. I saw him get better. I thought his throwing session at the combine was pretty strong, and it looked better than it did in Mobile. Looked like he'd been working in the lab. I'm stealing a term from Daniel Jeremiah there. And then you get to know the kid and just the work ethic and the approach and the personality and all that stuff that goes with it. And then the opportunity to take advantage of his floor, which is Taysom Hill. I mean, I don't think there's any question that if he never becomes a full-time starter as a quarterback in this league, that you can do some really, really exciting things with him. Things we've seen him do, that we know he can do. I had Max Brown on my show last week, and he talked about a lot of the X's and O's that go into this, and he did a great breakdown on his channel. And so all of that being said, sometimes I can only judge how I feel about a player in the moment. And the moment, even leading up to it when it looked like it might be a possibility, the moment they announced his name at 92, I was stoked. Because I think within the context of their current quarterback room, it might have been the best situation in the league that he could have gone to. Because there will be absolutely zero pressure. Forget about some of these fans that say it's 2012 all over again. And Russell Wilson, he's going to beat him out. They're going to trade Drew Lock, or Lock won't be on this roster. Nope. There's a plan in place. And that plan is they're going to carry 3 quarterbacks on this roster. They're going to use him in the short term. I do hope they have the guts to do that, because not many teams have over the last 30 years, not since Cordell Stewart. And if he never develops into a starter, he could still be an effective player that helps him win football games. But if he does, he can be a dynamic weapon.
Yeah, you mentioned there has been a couple of teams that have brought in guys that have been able, like Stewart or Taysom, that have done that role with it. Do you have any concerns about, maybe that throws off your starter when you're flipping in and out your quarterback like that to try to get that utilization of him?
I do. I think that's a very natural place to go to, and it's a natural concern. I just think getting to know Sam Darnold a little bit and just watching him now since we acquired him, and just his demeanor, his approach, talking to Max Brown about him last week. They were teammates together at USC, knows him really well, obviously. It's I don't think that in this particular situation, again, it goes into my statement I just made, that I don't think there's another quarterback room he could have jumped into in this league that would have benefited him as much as this one. And I think part of that reason is I don't think Darnold would have a problem with it. You can talk about, like, does it break a guy's rhythm or whatever? I don't think we're talking about him coming in and running a drive. I mean, I've seen 2 quarterback systems before, particularly in college, that I do feel like would disrupt. I've seen it happen at WSU over the years, where a guy will come in for a whole drive or 2. And I don't know how that would ever work. But you're bringing a guy in on 3rd and 1. You're bringing a guy in goal line. Didn't seem to bother Derek Carr in New Orleans, right? As long as you have the right mindset and it's executed properly.
Yeah, well said. If I had to have you lay a money bet down, gun to your head, and the answer's got to be right. 3 years from now, is Jalen Milroe our starting quarterback?
I think he is.
Oh, let's go. Okay, Dan.
I actually do. And that might just be me being an optimist. I just think that, I saw Jalen Hurts play in college, and then I saw him at the Senior Bowl, and I said, not in person, but I saw him go through that process, and then I saw him come out. I saw Lamar Jackson play in college, go through the process, come out. I saw Josh Allen go through the process, come out. Concerns about all 3 of them, to a lesser extent Lamar than the other 2, but about accuracy as a passer and processing and all those things. And they've all become really good players, right? They were all developed properly. They all had outstanding coaches. They all had great support systems around them. I just feel like when you listen, and I'm sure you have, when you're around Jalen Milroe and you listen to him talk and you hear about his approach, and now we're hearing he's on the field at 4:30 in the morning, all those things, the same things we heard about Russell Wilson, right? Mm-hmm. But the slight difference here is how genuine it is. Like, just he
had a shot, Dan. They had taken some shots.
I've never shied away from saying that I thought Russell Wilson was disingenuous and a lot of it was an act.
Hold on, Dan. Hold on. I gotta sound that.
It's genuine. I think he figures out a way to succeed. And now some of it might be out of his hands, right? Like you have to have the right guy. Like, Lamar was fortunate in that, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on his name. Greg Roman. Yeah. It was the perfect guy, right? As he was for Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco, right? Wasn't he the same guy that kind of, you have to have someone that knows how to use a running quarterback and can take advantage of that. I still say to this day, and I take so much crap for this, Lamar Jackson is not exactly, he's improved by leaps and bounds. He's not a surgeon, right? No. He doesn't stand in there and pick you apart with pinpoint accuracy on layered throws into tight windows. That's not his game. And yet, on most Sundays, he's the best player on the field, if not the best player in the league. Mm-hmm. It's if you can take Jalen Milroe, if you can improve his weaknesses, build on his strengths, and then figure out a way to utilize it all on a play-in, play-out basis, I think he finds a way to succeed.
I think you mentioned some really good points on this, and I can't counter anything with Roman. That I guess the worry I have a little bit with this is that the offense that you're onboarding here, the Shanahan offense in general, is not one that is the same, anywhere near the same of a Roman offense, which was highly geared towards the running ability and the read option looks and pistol looks and all this type of stuff in between to really, lead with that. And I think you're right about Lamar. I think Lamar can't throw a 9 route worth his life. I mean, he just cannot throw a 9 route. It is beyond him. And defenses realize it. It's why he gets clipped in the playoffs is these smart defensive coordinators start just forcing him to throw 5, 6, 9 routes over the course of the game by the coverages they've set up. Yeah. And that's where I just worry with Milroe. I think he certainly has that ability to build that kind of Roman-like offensive structure in and operate from within that. But can he do it on the timing-based concepts, quick passes, accurate, precise? That's the part where I'm really going to be looking for that, especially in preseason, those things to come forward. But you do mention maybe the most important part, which is the work ethic. And that if you're going to be a guy that's got to come this far, you're going to have as good a work ethic as anybody in the sport to get there, because it's such a hard position to master so many of those things once you become a pro. And there's a lot of things he's got to master now once he's become a pro that a lot of other college quarterbacks that maybe not even as talented as him have kind of already mastered at that point coming in. And so he can get it. Hopefully he does. I hope you're right about that, but that's kind of where some of my worries, come in on this one just a little bit.
Yeah. And I've been accused of being overly optimistic, being blinded by it. I do tend to believe in the old scouting adage that if you show me something once, it means you can do it. And it's my job as a coach now to get it out of you more often. And for all these people that just say, Milroe can't throw, he's terrible. You need to go back and watch his college tape with more of an open mind, because you can put together just as much as I could put an ugly, and you called it, in fact, I thought of this earlier, my ears perked up when you use this term. I think we should start a new show, an all 22 show, and call it, I think you came up with a great name for a podcast, Dirty Tape. I love it. You can put together some dirty tape on Jalen Milroe throwing the football. You absolutely can. You can also put some phenomenal tape together on him throwing the football, especially down the field. And as good as he is throwing the ball down the field, whatever the disconnect is in being able to do that mechanically, or the mechanics are perfect, the ball comes out perfectly, and he can really shred you deep. Where the disconnect is in that 15, 20 yard range to do that same thing, I don't know, but it tells me he can do it. And there are throws on his tape too, where he's layering throws in that range as well. He's very young. He's really, really young. So I think he just turned 22.
Something like that. I believe that's right.
There's an opportunity there. Now I'll say this for those who think that I'm just off my rocker. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's not the starting quarterback in 3 years, because it means that Sam Darnold is going to take this thing and run with it, take the next step in his development, become what we kind of saw Geno Smith become, right? But that they build an infrastructure around him so that he can really succeed and thrive. And that we're talking extension for Darnold in a couple of years, because it's always the best case scenario if your current guy can become the guy.
Not to mention you might have a Milroe 2 years in-house stock piece that you have right now. You can flip him suddenly for for talk a team into giving up a first, because
the old Green Bay way. Yeah. Aaron Brooks, Mark Brunell, Ty Detmer, Matt Hasselbeck, like they used backup quarterbacks as trade assets for years.
Mm-hmm.
It just, teams have gotten away from that because it's so hard to develop the second guy now, or let alone the third guy, which is kind of where the Packers made their money there for a while.
They did. John's remembering the old ways. He's mentioned it a couple times. So, he longs to try to do that same thing. It's like general manager catnip to do that kind of thing for them. I get a quarterback in the third and then I turn him around for the first and two. It's like, it's too much for them. Their brain, I think, can't take that possibility. It's like, I could just do that all the time. Just reset it, refresh. It's like, it's worth a shot.
I mentioned earlier how positive I was about the process this offseason. I think maybe one of the strongest moves that he made this offseason was bringing back Drew Lock, because we now know that they had targeted Jalen Milroe, and maybe the draft wouldn't have gone their way and they wouldn't have had a shot to get him, but that he was a guy that they had their eye on throughout this process. To go get another guy like Drew Lock to ensure, unless, the sky falls, in which case none of it matters anyway, that he will not have to face any pressure, either public scrutiny or internally or just within himself, of being the full-time guy as a rookie before he's ready, was I think one of the smartest moves he made.
To your point, you signed Drew Lock to a 2-year deal. I cannot be more stronger opinion on this Milroe thing than this next given point. You have got to give him 2 years. It's not a 1-year process. This has got to be 2 years. Like you said, should have gone back to college this year, should have come out next year, should have waited a year, and then comes out. That's when he should be ready to start, if he's ever going to be ready to start. The draw with every team out there, as you know, Dan, is you already heard it with Salk. Salk just over there, just chomping at the bit to get him in there.
Oh.
Every team drives into the spot like you just talked about to pull the guy back out in the field. And to me, I think you got to hard line this one and just say, no, you put your foot in the ground. You say, look, that doesn't mean you can't do the package thing. That's a different thing. Read option, 3rd and 1, tush push, whatever you want to do there. That's all irrelevant of you having him in there as actual starting quarterback, and give him the 2 years. Let him fix his mechanics. Let him get consistent in that process. Because if you rush him out too fast, what happens is they throw all of that stuff out the window and they drive right back to muscle memory. And in every way, from how they process to read to throwing the ball. And you'd see it with Tim Tebow. Remember Tim Tebow's off seasons? Oh, look at the mechanics. It's cleaned up. Look at the throwing motion. So tight. And then you get him into the games and the thing's like, it's a tugboat turning in the Puget Sound. And you got to be, to me, careful on this one. Colts did the same problem with me with Anthony Richardson. Richardson was young, had to give him time, let him sit. Did they do so? No, they couldn't wait to get him out in the field. And then what do they do, Dan? Read option. Then what happens? Gets hurt, running too much, read freaking option. So give him the 2 years. So you buying it? You with that?
Absolutely. I keep that quarterback room intact for 2 years, and hopefully the offensive staff. I've said this before. I've taken some grief for it. The people that say, well, if they have a really good year on offense, Kubiak might be in demand as head coach. I don't think he has the personality to blow people away in interviews. I think we're safe there for a little bit. It's the way I felt about Darrell Bevel and others. And so I do think, the conversations we're having this year about the defense, right? All the chemistry, all that continuity. They finished the season strong. 15 guys back that started games, all 11 starters, depending on, which configuration you're talking about. But you can make that case. And then you hear the narrative coming from the players this year. Man, we can play fast now. We don't have to stop and think. Mike McDonald's talking about opening up the playbook. I can use all my sim pressures now. I think, and this is going to lead to a more 360 degree wide angle lens question for you. To see if you agree with this, but this is a 2-year deal because of all the changes on offense. And for this team to get to where they can contend for Super Bowls again, this time next year, we need to be hearing the same things from the offensive players as we're hearing from the defensive players this year. We finally got an offensive line that's sticking together, right? We have a quarterback coming off a full season. It's not all new to him now. There's chemistry. There's everything else. Even if the season isn't perfect for Sam Darnold, and it probably won't be, and fans will be calling for his head the first time he throws a stupid interception, which he will. It's in his game. He's going to throw some of those head scratchers. But I think there were so many changes on offense this year that as much as, if it all clicks and it all comes together, sure, there's a world where we could win 12, 13 games. Is that realistic? Probably not. And if you pumped John Schneider and Mike McDonald full of truth serum and asked him if that's the plan, they'd probably say, no, it's 2026. Agree?
Yeah, I think 2026 is, in a lot of ways, this is the step back to take the 2 steps forward you had to do this offseason, and not signing up for the Geno Smith and DK contracts is also clearing the books because the timing just wasn't right for where the offense needs to be, to your point. Even if you brought Geno back, you still need to get this offensive line on point. You're not sure about DK's fit with this new offense exactly on where he's at with that. So you come back around to it where it makes a lot of sense that they've sort of taken we're not going all in on 2025, but we will be fully all in on 26. It doesn't prevent them if things click in right in 2025. And the thing that's notable about that Saints team is Kubiak came in there as a first-year offensive coordinator, and he had improvement across the board on that team instantaneously. It wasn't wait till midseason. It was those guys. I mean, that line, you look at and I know PFF's what it is, but everyone on that offensive line had like career best years from a PFF rating standpoint, from starters to backups. I mean, that's really notable when you're seeing it across everybody on board, and especially for a Saints offense that isn't exactly a juggernaut walking into the season.
No.
So, I mean,
you're talking about Trevor Penning was being talked about as a bust. They moved him to the right side. You're starting a rookie at left tackle. They had all sorts of injuries. I think that's definitely a feather in John Benton's cap, what he was able to do with that line.
So maybe able to do it here too. I mean, this is something John's been hammering us with, right, throughout the offseason. He did it over and over again every time he got asked the question, where it's like, no, it's not a matter of talent. It's a matter of coaching it better. And so maybe the proof in the pudding will be that we see the instantaneous returns where they actually have a competent, capable offensive line coach that can teach the technique truly and right, versus guys that are just sort of like Tom Cable, just figure it out. I feel like Tom would have just been like a big thing of chew and been like, figure it out. Versus, hand here, hand there, foot here, first step, foot here, that kind of stuff,
Let's talk about the offensive line because it still elicits strong opinions. I'm sure we'll see him in the comments. There's one commenter in particular. I know exactly what he's going to say once we start this conversation, but I love him. Don't you feel like we're already ahead of where we were last year and the year before and the year before? Because when you start to look at, here we are in mid-June and it feels like 4/5 of the starting lineup is pretty solidified. And you're talking about Charles Cross being 24 years old now, right? Bigger, stronger. He's added 15 pounds. Gray Zabel firmly established as the start at left guard. Is he going to have some rookie struggles? Of course he is, but there's no concern about who that player is going to be. We're 70% sure it's going to be Oluwatimi at center, but if it's not, it means that Jalen Sundell played great in the offseason and training camp and earned that position. And I think we all like his upside. Right guard, still in question. It's down to 2 guys. And then at right tackle, we have what appears to be the strongest, fittest, healthiest Abe Lucas we've had since his rookie season. I've said many times that last year, it wasn't just that we were too young up front. It wasn't that they weren't deployed properly, but I think one of the many mistakes that Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb made last year is they just didn't solidify that lineup in time to give them a chance to play together. They brought Connor Williams in at the last second, right? They had Haynes and Bradford still competing into week 5 and 6 for that spot, rotating them. I feel like they're already ahead of the curve.
I would guess I'd probably more slightly ahead of the curve on that. And a big part of this is going to depend upon the health of Abraham Lucas, of course, and that Abraham's knee is good. And that, even when they asked him the other day, are you over at 100%? It's like, nobody's ever really 100%. It's like, I was getting a bit of the vibes of like when Tyler Lockett said, I'll never be as fast as I once was after his injury, or where Dale Taylor said after his rod that he had in his leg, you always kind of feel it. And you go, yeah, those give me a little bit of pause there. So I'm a little worried with Lucas, but I really think he's kind of the backbone of this because Charles Cross, to your point, will be a top 10 left tackle in the sport. Oluwatimi can be at least a middle of the road center, and then Abraham Lucas can be a top 20 tackle in this sport. That's the makings of a good offensive line. A couple of years ago, through those first 10 games of Geno Smith, when that line was playing for really good, run blocking, pass protecting well, Geno was on his way to being even in the MVP discussions. It's kind of forgotten about because it fell off after that 10 games in Germany happened. Yeah. But if those 3 parts are working well, that's a good enough to get a functional line going. I am a little worried about the guard. You walked into this offseason, Dan, from my perspective of it as being that, look, the offensive line has been a weakness of this team for 10 years. It's been not only a weakness, but it's been a positional group that has sunk the whole bloody ship over a couple of those years, a few different times. You need to make this a point of priority. I'd love to make it a strength. You walked in this offseason, you signed Josh Jones, you drafted Gray Zabel. That's not doing what I just said. That just isn't. And being in honesty and all that, that's not. Now, maybe it's enough. Maybe the coaching is just all it is. I have felt like that's a little bit of a patsy excuse by John, where he just can't kind of cross the bridge of, look, you got to overpay at this position now. That's the name of the game. That's the price of the goods. Inflation's a bitch. Sorry. It's the way it's going to roll, my friend. Just that's how you got to go. And it's just kind of like I get that feeling from him. He's like, I don't want to do it. And then he did the first round pick and he's like, there, happy. You guys happy now? Now I'm done. I got a little bit of that vibe with him. And it's like, okay, maybe he's right on this, but it has been 10 years. It ain't a 1-year problem. It's that you've had this blind spot in your rearview mirror quite often over and over again. So I'm hopeful Zabel can slide in there, but this is North Dakota State rookie going in there to start at left guard. And I've talked to heard a lot of players talk about him, and a lot of players talk about him as guys can eventually be a center. And I hope he can make it left guard. Team's going to run him at left guard at first thing, but he might end up just be a guy that eventually slides into center. And we're still looking at the left guard going, I'm not really sure. And Bradford and Haynes, we'll see on that. Haynes should be a better fit for the zone scheme. He should, but that was a bad rookie season. And Bradford has not come forward as a player that was a very raw, good kind of guy coming out of LSU. I don't know that he's come substantially far in his game. Lumea, all the goodness that he brought in the run block game, and a lot of that goodness that he brought in the run block game was the gap stuff with him pulling back across the formation post snap and smushing somebody. You're running zone now. Probably not going to run as much of that gap stuff. He'll be running, and then he's a nightmare in pass protection. So you do have a little bit to me of some thinness here, but with that said, I'm not trying to crap all over your point with it. I do agree with you that it is improved and it is further than where it's been. It definitely is.
Yeah. It is interesting. I find that, that so much is made out of the wide zone scheme and what that's going to do for the running game. But I don't know that people talk enough about pass protection, right? Like you have to, you could say this about 80% of the quarterbacks in the NFL, but you have to protect Sam Darnold to get the best out of him, right? We saw that in Minnesota when they broke down. I think he's taken too much of the blame for those last 2 games, right? The Rams came at him. They were red hot, and that front and those young guys and Fisk and Verse and they were really dialed in there at the end of the year. They were causing problems for everybody. If it hadn't snowed like it did, the Eagles might not be holding the Lombardi right now. The Rams came to play that day, and that defense was on fire. But there's a reason that Minnesota went and flushed out their entire interior offensive line themselves and replaced them all in the offseason. It wasn't good enough. But when a lot of people come to me and they say, I don't like Oluwatimi. I don't think he's a perfect fit for the wide zone, or Anthony Bradford, not a perfect fit for the wide zone, even though John Schneider says they like how he can get to the second level. And he tested through the roof for a guy his size when it comes to the RAS and all that stuff when he was going through the draft process. But I don't think pass protection gets talked about enough, right? At the end of the day, we need to run the football. And I said earlier in the show that I think that's the biggest key to this offense, but we got to protect too. And some of those guys just can't. That's why I don't see Satao Lamea getting any snaps, because he just really, really struggles there. But I feel the same way about Bradford. Like, as much as you can see it when you see him. I remember there were a couple of reps in was it the Charger game last year in the preseason? So week 2. There were reps where he's taking 2 guys out with one arm. Like, he's so strong.
He's a bear.
Then there are times in pass protection where he looks like Justin Britt did when he tried to play left guard for a minute. Remember that? Like
I do.
How bad that was.
It's right guard at that, and just couldn't make that work.
Let me ask you that. Week 1, if you have your choice and there's a couple of guys that are borderline, do you go with the 5 best pass protectors or the 5 best run blockers?
I go run blockers. It was a bit of my issue last year when they did this, frankly, because I think we went Bradford and we went Lakin off the gate, and then you wanted to go pass the ball 70% of the time. What are we doing here, right? Like,
help and
that's what we call, just counterintuitive all the way. And so, to your point on that, and I agree with you on the pass protection, by the way, that is absolutely going to be vital, and that was a big sinking part of the ship. I also agree with you on the Darnold thing. Doesn't get talked about. I think he was sacked 2 less times than Geno was last year, and according to the advanced NFL stats, he was pressured more. And so, it wasn't that he was given some freebie, but also, to your point, he had, I think, 3.06 seconds in the pocket is on average what Sam was holding onto the ball with. Geno was at 2.82.
4th lowest in the league.
Yeah. So he got a little extra time, and Geno at 2.82 did not get that extra time. So Sam's not going to be afforded that this year. Two things I think.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and he created some of that on his own too. If I remember, I was just looking at those time to throw numbers the other day too. And I think the 3 guys below him that were worse were Lamar, Hurts, and was it Josh Allen, maybe?
Allen. Yep. Allen was the other guy. Yeah, you're right.
Some of that is
He would hold it a little long. Sam's fearless. Sometimes on a detriment, unless he's seeing ghosts, and then he's not.
I will say this: recently, I went back and looked at all of his red zone touchdowns and interceptions from last year in Minnesota. Did a whole breakdown on all 26 of his red zone touchdowns that he threw last year for the Vikings with Bryce Coots. And in the red zone, for as much as he gets accused of, again, like a lot of quarterbacks do, holding the football too long sometimes. That must be happening in the middle of the field, because one thing that I saw watching all those cut-ups of him in the red zone, he's pretty freaking decisive down there. He gets the ball out in structure and he gets it out quick.
Yeah. And I think even I remember watching the first 4 or 5 interceptions a couple of weeks ago. I was building up for the show of him last year, because I started in going, well, he's probably being pressured on all these interceptions. That's when, or something's happening bad. But it was really just, he's trying to fit in a tight window and he just lets it rip, and it sailed on him a little bit, or it was too tight of a window. Shouldn't have thrown it. Probably should have just dirted it up. And, but it was good. Only 6 interceptions on the year. The decision-making overall was really tight. I just think there's 2 things that are going to help it this year, though, at the forefront of this. One, sequencing of plays and play calling. The predictability of plays last year, the way that defenses could come out in formations. And I'm sure you saw the same thing on all 22. I can't tell you how many snaps where it'd be a run play, for instance, and I'm watching players multiple angles coming towards the run play before the snap, knowing right where it is. I mean, say nothing of having to kind of hold their turn and then they can go, but they're literally, there's this Lenore snap where he's off the slot and he makes it a 2-yard, it's an A gap run and it's a negative 2-yard play just because he's sprinting the whole time into the backfield to go take it away. Yeah. So that's something where Grubb showed everything. There was some stat about when you ran when you were under center, you never ran play action or something. At one point, it was always going to be a run play, something like that. Where the team was.
I remember the biggest point. It was a real eye opener for me last year. Was the side that they run play action to, that they never actually ran that play. In the running game. So they're faking to a play that they never showed.
Right. And defenses, that's just rudimentary school level stuff for defenses, the NFL to pick up on as far as tells. So that part's going away. This is we talked about not falling into successes before at the start of the show. This is where you're not falling into this as a way of a modality of your offense. This is who you are as an offense. The Shanahan scheme, the West Coast offensive scheme, is trying from what it's doing pre-snap to confuse the ever-loving hell out of you post-snap. It does not want you knowing what is coming prior to the snap. It's almost at the beginnings of this offense in so many ways. Where Grubb's offense, you could say, that's more of kind of like the 9th or 10th thing on his list of priorities, And so that's where this is going to help out pass protection, because if that guy in front of me knows it's a pass or knows it's a run and I got to block him, my job's got to be twice as hard if that's going to be the case. And I think a lot of people just naturally improve by the way they sequence plays and by also running the ball more. That was going to be my second point on this, Dan. 68% of the time you passed the ball last year, getting more of a balance just in itself will force defenses now to have to play it more straight up prior to the snap and should bring more success offensively with it.
It's funny because when we acquired Sam Howell last year, I was one of those that was in support of the move just because I liked his upside, liked him coming out of college. And like many other people, I said, sure didn't do him any favors with Eric Bieniemy in Washington, right? They threw it 70% of the time, shotgun the whole time, no play action, no 12 personnel, just hung him out to dry. And then, this doesn't have anything to do with Sam Howell. It's just because he didn't play last year. But then that's exactly what we saw Ryan Grubb kind of do last year also. I think we were 5th in the league at leaving our tackles on an island, just for an example. And you're talking about not 2 good tackles, not a healthy Abe Lucas. You're talking about Mike Jarrell, Stone Forsythe, a George Fan on one leg. Like, just, I was
looking at last night.
I don't want to talk
Forsythe was 19th in pressures allowed last year. Only played like 7 games.
Right.
I'm looking up last night. I'm like, oh my God.
For the longest time after he was hurt. And
he was leading the league.
He's
leading like 3 weeks he'd been out, and it's like, he's still leading the league. It was bad. And he did them no favor. I think you could say, couldn't you, if there was as much of a difficulty of an offensive coordinator could make on his offensive line to make their job harder, if you could go as extreme in a direction just about as you could go for NFL offensive coordinators to go in that, Grubb was tap dancing outside that door.
Yeah.
It was pretty rough with him, and it was frustrating to watch.
Got to catch up on some super chats. Brandon Coots, co-host of the
What's up, Bryce?
Down here.
What's up, Mr. Coots?
little self-promotion here. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, head over to the new Patreon page, check out the membership tiers there, 7-day free trials on everything. So you can watch this video for free. Although I'd prefer that you let the trial kick in and elapse and become stay a member. But it just gives us so much more freedom over there to do the all 22 stuff. There's no copyright issues to speak of, at least not yet. Let's hope they don't catch up to that over there. But Bryce came on with me and helped me break down all those Sam Darnold red zone touchdown passes. And it was really, really cool. So if you guys want to check that out, you can do that over on Patreon, or you can become a paid member of the YouTube channel here as well. And it's available to you also.
Thank you, Bryce, man. Got connected with you, brother.
Shane from Down Under. Tuned in late, but have the same shirt on as Brandon. I guess
Let's go, bro.
He's fanboying.
Good minds think alike.
Speaking of shirts and hats and coffee cups, check out the new online store, by the way. Just added some new items to it today.
I was seeing you complain about going through the how you like that YouTube maze of getting your store posted.
Dude, you and I, this is our $1 million idea. Can we create a website that does it all? That gets the product for you, right? That processes the payments, takes the payments, and then just links directly to YouTube. My goodness, it was unbelievable.
They did it. I had fourth wall rolling with it, and then they just kind of turned it off all of a sudden in the middle of the night with fourth wall. So I was like, YouTube put the clamps down for whatever reason suddenly on it. So yeah.
Now I have it locked in, and it's so much fun. I think I go every day and play around with new products and add new stuff to the store.
Yeah. It's fun. They got a lot of stuff you can do. That's nice.
Let's see. Shane's turning in late. Alexander Ramsey, viable options. Yeah, you're gonna have to listen again. We went over all those in pretty great detail. But Shane, it's always great to see you. I'm always happy to do these later night streams because then he can watch us on his time zone.
In general terms, Shane, and the answer is a big yes there on both. They're both slightly different players in what they bring, but both would be fits, both would be upgrades, both would be improvements, and neither is going to break the bank to bring him in or cost significant trade capital. So it's sort of like the plus side versus the negative side definitely is pretty overwhelming with both those guys. There's risk on both. You're not going to get a guy at this stage of the off season where there's no risk in what you're adding on to them. They would be traded or signed much earlier in the process, but the upside is very true with both.
Absolutely. Randy McDaniel, I think he's from your side of things. Welcome. And thanks for
that.
Whose style fits Kubiak's scheme the best? So we're talking running backs here, right? K9, Charbonnet, Damian Martinez. I'll throw Kenny McIntosh in there as well. When I did my 53, my projection, I had McIntosh not making it. Not because I don't like him, but because I love Damian Martinez that much. I think they can only keep 3 running backs, and I thought McIntosh had a good chance to get through the practice squad. You can still keep him de facto on the roster. But so include him in this as well. Outside of injury, who leads the team in rushing yards and touchdowns, and who benefits the most from a fullback?
Well, K9 is going to be the guy that benefits the most from the fullback because he's a guy that just is going to be able to get to the spot very quickly. And there's always been that with him, and especially last year, incessant penetration. And it's like it can be just a single guy coming in there, and now he's got to change his route, can't get downhill quite as fast. Part of this, what's going to be nice with Walker is that Kubiak's going to take Walker's Achilles heel out of his bag. And what I mean by that is that Walker's freedom within the prior couple of offenses to decide where he wants to go and how much cuts he wants to make. And a lot of times it can lead to a really great big play. It's also left times where you watch tape with him and he's turning down holes. And part of that's understandable. You're getting hit. Oh, now there's a hole. Oh, you missed it, right? Versus anticipating you're about to be, hit again.
It's like trying to hit a fastball in Major League Baseball. Like it's the hesitation. If you miss it for a split second, it's gone.
It's the stat that's one of the greatest stats from last year when you want to talk about Charbonnet and Walker and being hyped about him this year, which is that Seahawks were 32nd in the league, where I think on average your running backs 0.3 yards were being hit by a defender after they got the ball, 0.3 yards. Yeah. And then Saquon Barkley and company led the way at 3.3. Right. 0.3, 3.3 at the top. That's a huge difference. So he's going to benefit from the fact of take your brain out of this. You're going to be a little bit robot-like to the first level, Ken, because this is what Kubiak's going to tell him. It's to the first level, you're robot. I don't want you thinking. I don't want you, where's my cut back in the backfield? Get to the hole, get through the hole. And then when you get to the second level, go crazy and do whatever you want to do. Yeah. But you are going to be a robot going to that hole. No more freedom. And that's going to help him out, I think, at times, especially because they're going to block it up better. But also, this is a blocking scheme that's about laying your block for just enough time. It's not, I take my guy on a ride 10 yards down the field. It's, I land my block, I arch my shoulders sideways, the back's through my back on my side, and he's through the hole and he's gone. And so the speed of K9 with that is going to be the best suited thing. And he's got that more than anybody else on the roster. So that'd be my guess, is that he gets the most touchdowns and he gets the most yards when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to be consistent. And I just, on the show that'll be released in the morning with Jeff Simmons, we talked about running backs today. We talked about breakout players, and I had Walker being one of them. I think provided he can be healthy and play 17 games. I think this scheme and this system, this offense is set up for him to really reach his ceiling. And the thing I like about the wide zone, right, is the goal there of the outside plays anyway, the outside zone stuff, which they're not going to run it 100% of the time, but predominantly is you're trying to stretch the defense out, and then you can see where the openings are, and then you can cut and make a decision. It's almost as if what K9 tries to do whenever he does reverse field and do those crazy backfield reverse plays, it's like we're doing that for him, right? What he's trying to accomplish by cutting back and reversing his field is what the wide zone is supposed to accomplish for you at first blush.
Yeah.
It's giving you that opportunity right off the bat, but with a lot less tread on your tires, right?
Yeah. Well, you're going to get some more of the positive play, just less penetration. This system does not allow theoretically as much penetration as some of the past. And these guys who just get hit the backfield, there's nowhere to go if you're getting hit after the handoff. You're just kind of done.
Thanks, Bryce.
Let's go, Bryce.
Appreciate it, buddy. And for those of you who don't know, this comment is really great. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to put it up, not just because of the super thanks, but Bryce is a coach and he runs a quarterback academy and he's an offensive coordinator and he knows offense. He played college quarterback. He says, you guys are so on point with the offense. The best thing about this offensive scheme is that the same formation can lead to so many different plays, but look the same to the defense. This is something I have wanted us to do for so long because it's what I have watched the Rams and the 49ers and Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota and these other great offensive coordinators do. And you hear about it all the time. And, the same Sean McVay will run 10 different plays out of the same exact formation, or he'll run the exact same play out of 10 different formations. And you never know. He'll run the same play at you 8 times and a half, but he's going to make it look different every time. And I've always thought, why can't we have nice things too?
I'm 100% with you. I mean, go back to even with the Carroll offenses, brother. I remember their stat I was looking at with Walker just from 2 years ago, where he was averaging on rushes between the tackle boxes, 3.7 yards per carry average. This is before last year. And then on runs outside of the tackle boxes, or what would be wide zone, he was averaging 5.3 yards per carry. And you go, well, we didn't really run much wide zone. And you come back to predictability. And it's like, oh yeah, a lot of those offenses you could see, much like last year, teams would just concentrate on squeezing down A and B gaps because they knew what was coming. And this is an advantage. You just can't just take advantages and leave them on the table, as I like to say. Like, well, we could take advantages, but we're just going to leave that on the table and concentrate on these things. Use everything you have in your midst to get the most out of your offense. And Bryce is absolutely on point with it, where this offense is not, it's a centerpiece of what it's trying to do at the origin point, at its beginning point, and then it builds off of that, is to say, we want to make sure we're hiding our intentions. We want to make sure this defense can't cheat, that they can't zero in on what we're doing. It's why, for instance, the West Coast offense is so much built usually on peppering the ball to so many different targets over the course of the game. You're not trying to work a one wide receiver over and over again. You're trying to constantly make the defense never know where you're going with the ball as far as just how you're using it. That's how you come to these quarterbacks. You remember all the West Coast guys like Montana and Hassel back in the day. They'd say, well, he's got 24 completions today to 11 different wide receivers, or 11 different guys like that. And you go, yeah, that's because you're never letting the defense kind of pin down what you're doing exactly. They always got to play it straight up. And if you get a defense prior to the snap that has to play it straight up where they can't cheat, I think that's a big point of helping you for success on that given play, because we've seen the other side of it so often.
On the flip side, I'll tell you something else that I want to see out of Clint Kubiak this year is when you find something that works, just freaking stick with it. Mm-hmm. Keep doing it until the other team proves that they can stop it. I just
like the gap.
You talk about the Arizona game last year where we just dominated Arizona, and granted, they had some issues up front, and that's why they spent so many resources trying to address it this offseason. But they had so much success with the pin and pull stuff, and bringing LeMaya and Lucas around, and pulling and going with more of a power scheme, and Charbonnet ran nuts, and then we didn't see much of that the rest of the year. It's like he outsmarting himself, right? And gets too cute. Like, well, now they've seen it, we can't show it to him again. Screw that. Find out what you do well and do it. I felt the same way about Shane Waldron, that he would just kind of experiment throughout a game. And when he found something that would work, it wouldn't register with him. And he would just keep going on his playlist. He'd go, okay, well, what else on my playlist? I prepped it. I better use it. So let's get to what's next. Right.
Great point. Yeah, no, I felt the same way about it. I think that they definitely wouldn't stay with stuff that's worked recently, and it's simplistic kind of, but it is like these guys get in kind of caught in the moment. They get kind of lost despite the forest and the trees and all that, and they go, okay, I really want to get this stuff by that, but like just stay with it. Remember the pin and pull stuff too. You had the Cardinal game, and they got back the Green Bay game. I think you got the touchdown by Charbonnet that you actually used on a pin and pull in that game, but you barely ran in that one. And then remember, Sam Howell comes down the field, and what'd you have? Sam passed like 13 straight times or something like that. And it was a close game. It wasn't that you were down by 4 touchdowns. It was still within easy reach to go and get back into it. But he had that tendency with Grubb. He was your typical air raid offensive coordinator, which is they run begrudgingly.
Can't help themselves.
They just can't help them. They want to throw the football. It's all they want to really do. And the best of ones can fight against that a little bit, because that's where you can get yourself if you go too extreme. And it's like you saw it last year, but it's an archetype and a cliche that kind of fits with those guys.
Yeah. There must have been some conversation in the comments about Sam Darnold and his infamous Monday Night Football game with the Jets, where he was mic'd up and he was getting sacked and he was being blitzed mercilessly, and he got caught saying, "Man, I'm seeing ghosts out there." I got to talk to Max Brown about this the other day and get some cool perspective, and I always felt like that was overblown a little bit, because even in the moment, I never felt like the way he said it. And now getting to know his personality a little bit and watching all these interviews and everything, now that he's ours, he wasn't shell shocked. It wasn't like it ruined him. And it was just a quarterback talking about the game. Right. And it was just, and Max says that's just the way he is. He blows. He's got that Ted Lasso goldfish mentality where he just like doesn't let things really bother him and stick with him. So, but yeah, awesome. Green's Farm here with the super chat from your side.
Isn't it inevitable too? I mean, isn't it, if you have a quarterback in the environment he was in with the New York Jets, or any quarterback, and this is part of what was so impressive about Geno, really frankly,
New York Jets have experienced.
Yeah, all of the quarterback. If you have a quarterback that you're going to let be inundated with too much pressure over too given long period of time, and every quarterback's got a different meter for how much they can take on that, the inevitability is they're going to break. It's like torture. Everyone breaks. It's the very same thing to me. Don't you agree? Where it's like, look, there's no QB that's just overcoming that all the time. Mahomes in this last Super Bowl, look at how he looked. Seeing goes back there.
It does break some players. It really does. It breaks it screws up their wiring, and they never recovered from it. We've seen many cases of that, right? With some of these guys drafted high and shoved into bad situations. But the thing that really encouraged me after watching that tape with Bryce the other day is, even with that background that Darnold had, and coming from there and having to run for his life and not having the protection or the weapons around him, you don't see the after effects of that in the way he plays the football game. There's so many reps on tape last year of him staying in the pocket when it's muddy and it's falling apart around him. Yeah, he gets out and run. He moves around, and there's, and he takes his sacks too, right? But he's not trigger happy, right?
Yeah. The way that flinching, something like that. Like, I agree with you. He played really tough.
Some of his best throws last year were like as he's getting blasted.
Yeah. No, he played tough. And that thing you talked about, guys get broken. Some guys get broken and they never can kind of get over it. Some guys can get broken and they got the mental toughness to kind of carry. I'm not in that same environment. Don't let the bad habits build up and you overcome it and kind of keep carrying. And he seems to be one of those guys cut from the latter rather than the former cloth on that, in my opinion. I agree. I saw the same thing with him on tape last year, which is, number one, he wasn't kept as clean as everybody would like to tell you he is. It's a tale between 2 seasons, but it's also, even in that Rams game, that was the culmination in that second Rams game of what had been building up for weeks, that incessant pressure thing. Because the pressure was much more into the second half of the schedule when they lost Darisaw. O'Neal's out in the second, I think by the second quarter, of that Rams game. So both of his tackles are out. The interior's a mess. And so it just got worse and worse. And that's why into that Rams game, he eventually got to maybe the worst version of Darnold we saw in that game, is that this is what's going to happen to any quarterback in that kind of environment when it kind of has that much going wrong across the board up front.
And even your one constant, right? The one piece that you could count on the whole year was Garrett Bradbury at center, and he just can't hold up to power. I mean, he would just get bulldozed and manhandled at times. And so, yeah, it wasn't always easy for Sam there. And yet he was.
You mentioned there's a reason they rebuilt it this offseason in that interior, you know?
Yep. Zachary, thanks for the super chat. To my eyes, the problems with the O-line last season look like bad coaching. I think Haynes' rookie season was wasted by coaches who couldn't coach in the NFL. I don't think it's all that. I do think Christian Haynes had some issues with play strength last year. I am encouraged. Looks like he's changed his body a little bit this year. That's, not always easy to tell, and everyone's in the best shape of their lives this time of year. Right?
Yeah. Camera's getting better.
But I do hold on to, and I know he was slightly on the older end of the spectrum because he played 5 years in college. I do wholeheartedly believe, and there are exceptions to this. There are guys that hit the ground running and play well as rookies, even guys from smaller levels of competition. But you hear guys that played in the league talk about how they really aren't physically developed till they're 25, 26 years old. There's a reason that top 10 drafted nose tackles take, Quinnen Williams took him 3 years. Justin Madubuike took him 3 years. Christian Wilkins took him. Some of these bigger guys and linemen, it takes them longer to develop, especially if they're not coming from the SEC, right? Or Big Ten. I do think that this is a scheme fit for him. And if we're going to see Christian Haynes succeed, that it's kind of now or never, that he either seizes the job this year and becomes a functional player, at least. I don't think anyone thought, even when he was drafted 81, he was going to be a superstar. He just didn't have the traits, didn't have the length, right, that you would think where you would project someone as an all-pro. But can he be a functional, effective player at right guard? I think he can be.
Yeah, you're just looking for solid play. I mean, even if you got league average, speaking to what we're going to get from our tackles and the potential of Gray Zabel and the steadiness of Olatimi theoretically in there, that would be enough, I think, to get this more than be a functional offense at that point. And I still have hopes for him as well. I don't think there's some bust status on the top of him. I think Zachary's onto something here a little bit, and it's a couple layers deep. It's both how they coach these guys from a fundamental standpoint, where you didn't see anybody come forward. You didn't see a Bradford into year 3 coming forward at all. I feel like Cross is kind of who he is. He's kind of doing that a bit on his own a little bit with it. And then the play calling on top of that being atrocious, from the amount of passes that you called to the predictability of your formations. You wrap that all together, and it's going to make the offensive line's job tremendously hard, especially a rookie that, like you say, might be a little underpowered. Well, now that just makes it that much brighter on display, that lack of power, because everything else is kind of crappy around the edges too. So that part's going to be fixed. That part's going to be mightily improved, and it should bring improvement across the board with it. Did with the Saints last year, right? Everybody on that line, you can look at everybody's PFF grade. I'm not overstating this, folks. 1 through 5. Look at the backups who played substantial time. Look at their career grades, whether they've been in this league for 6 years, 7 years, a Lucas Patrick type, a veteran journeyman lineman. Look through each and every one of them. They all improved year 1 instantaneously under Kubiak. And I think that's telling, because that's just not what we tend to see when it comes to coaches around the league. Like you're talking about needing a little bit of that time to institute things.
Yeah. And John Benton's resume is what it is. He's got a great track record of success, especially in the scheme. I really like what I'm hearing from OTAs. I think it was Corbin on the show last week who was saying that he pointed out the difference in approach and teaching philosophies and technique and execution from Scott Huff to John Benton. And last year with Huff, he would take guys off to the side. He was very quiet. He slowed things down. It was all where he says this year it's intense, and you got to move and you got to get from one thing to the next. And if you have a bad rep, they're pulling you aside immediately and correcting you and coaching you hard and getting you right back in there without a lot of downtime. That just seems like it's probably the right way to coach the modern athlete.
It does. It's precise, detail driven. It's in this scheme, it's got to be that way, because it's so less about just the mano go whoop the guy's butt across from you. It's about understand the block that's required, grab the right tool out of your tool belt that you're going to need for this particular play. And we're going to give you a couple of different tools to utilize. And so that's what I think they're trying to do. I think you saw a little bit of that on just like pass sets on 7-7 when they're dropping back. Watch those linemen on some of those cut-ups and taking a lateral step. They're really telegraphing their hands up and under. I mean, they're doing more so than I've seen in prior years. I know it's an empty snap on them throwing on air, but the fact that they're making them rep that out in that way, and you're seeing all 5 of them across the board take their own individual kind of unique step, arm placement, hands. And they're not even go up against you, but it's just air they're blocking against. But you're seeing them tangibly moving their hands into the right place to where it's got to be hitting into. And I think that's just locking it in, where these details matter in this scheme. And if you can master them, You don't have to be a dominant player to win. Like offensive lines that the Niners have gotten by on in recent years, for instance. Yeah, Williams is great, but who else has been the game wrecker down there on that offensive line for them? And Pooney was nice in his first year last year as a rookie, but they've been kind of getting by with guys, and it's because you don't have to be dominant to do good in this scheme. It's really lineman friendly, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. All those fans that thought that we should have, cleaned out the whole group this offseason and tried to figure out a way to sign 5 All-Pros. I think the 49ers, it's a great example. I mean, Trent Williams, obviously one of the all-time greats, but San Francisco fans wanted a lot more change in that group this offseason than they got. And they're frustrated that there is so much continuity, right? So ask 49er fans how they feel about that offensive line group, but yet they're effective. And it's because, like you said, everything has to be dialed in and all operating together. We touched on this earlier, Greens Farm, about the question about whether or not Sam Darnold is the unquestioned starter, and Mike McDonald's. I thought it was a pretty funny response to it, but I will frame the question this way, right? And I have my own thoughts about, there was a lot of discussion that day about how stupid it was that the question was even asked, and the question should never be asked. As a former journalist, I have my own ideas about that. But as far as I can never remember so many things being reported from OTAs that have been so ridiculously blown out of proportion as I have this year. And I'm sure it's just the growth and proliferation of content creators and people trying to create accounts for themselves and create engagement and all of that. But when you see things like people taking stats and posting stats of how all 5 Cleveland quarterbacks, their completion percentages and everything in practices and 7-on-7s and skeleton drills. When you see things posted about JJ McCarthy and the best throw that I've ever seen in OTAs, he's having a historically good OTA, just the hyperbole, where do you think that's coming from, if I didn't just already touch on it, and just your thoughts on the ridiculousness?
Well, it's a frustration for me on doing this at times, content creation wise, because the system is so heavily skewed towards hyper positivity, I guess is the word that I would use. And I think that that's a struggle for me, where I want to operate more from getting as close to truth as I can. I won't always hit there, but that's more of what I'm angling towards. And I think sometimes you have to make the choice of going towards one or the other in the nature of this business. And that a lot of guys choose, I think, the easy way out, which is just to simply wave the pom-poms and call it a day. So that's what I extend this out of. I think it's just an extension of guys waving pom-poms essentially, and that they understand that that's what's going to get me the most views and the likes and the subs. And it does. I mean, it works. So I can't argue with it. It's the nature of the beast a little bit. That doesn't mean, though, now that it isn't just complete BS that you're fostering out at every single turn. Right. It is then that too, in addition to it. And, you're making a bit of a choice at that point between, to me, doing something that's actually got something tangible to it and doing something that's just completely empty and means nothing. And which would you rather drive as far as what you do in this? But that's the question for those folks that want to operate, from that standpoint of it. I am one of those folks. I understand journalism. I understand questions are going to be asked. Here's my issue with the whole, you got to ask the question thing there. You can't even begin to start with me on the local Seattle media being somehow this burgeoning force of journalism that asks the hard questions. That is complete and utter ridiculousness. It's not. And Mike Salk's not one of those guys either. Mr. It's all baseball. It's just baseball. I mean, he is the epitome of a guy that will want to keep his access, so he'll ask questions to do. And this is one where he's asking a question because he knows it'll drive clicks and views and it'll get him on better spotlight. And that's why he's asking it, not because he's trying to get to some inherent truth. So let's be clear on that with what his intentions are and what he's trying to do with that there, because it's really a nothing question. There is no quarterback controversy. They've told you the plan in place. They've told you what the intention is. There's no reason to ask it if they've told you that information. And it does bother me because I think there's a lot of times the local Seattle media drops the ball. For instance, how many articles were written about Coach Carroll being on the hot seat? Should he be on the hot seat? Should he not? How many questions did you remember being asked in all of those press conferences with the underhanded softball question after softball question thrown to Carroll in the midst of the year where he's about to be fired after that season? You're free to correct me. Was there any stories written, Dan? Was there really any hardball questions being asked in those press conferences?
No, but I don't know And I get it. I hear this all the time, hearing it a lot about the Mariners right now, right? Yeah, like there's one particular person who has followed me for years on Twitter, and we talk baseball all the time, and he's constantly, he'll directly tweet reporters that cover the Mariners. Why aren't you asking about this? Why aren't you asking the hard questions? Why aren't you asking about this? And as someone who's been in those rooms before, like, I get it. You have to walk a fine line sometimes. And I do wonder if the Seahawks, as much as any team in the league, are buttoned up. Like they don't have leaks unless they're intentional, right? Like they leak things out if it can benefit them, and they will do that. So, you know, when you look at I have all the respect in the world for, I think that media room is outstanding. Like Greg Bell, Michael Sean Dugar, Bob Condotta, Corbin Smith, like those guys all do even Brian Nimhauser, who didn't have a background in journalism at all and got the opportunity to be credentialed last year. I think he's been hitting it out of the park. He's been doing a tremendous job. Really professional approach from him. But sometimes you can ask the question and keep asking the hard questions. And sometimes one of two things happens. Either they tune you out or they stop giving you access. And if you're not getting the answers, then you're going to stop asking the question. There is you got
to ask the question first, though, Dan. That's the whole reason I said, who was the guy asking the question?
That's why I say, and I think you and I disagree a little bit on this. I've always been of the opinion that if you're curious about something, it's worth asking about. If you think one of your viewers or listeners might be curious about something, it's worth asking about. And now I will say this, I've only seen the print version. I haven't gone back and watched the video, but I could 100% see myself sitting there with Mike McDonald and asking, hey, Mike, you know, and barring injury, is there any conceivable way that Sam's not the starter? I would ask that question. I don't think it's ridiculous. You and I are sitting here asking each other questions that we've asked dozens of times over the last couple of months. Because we're content creators, we need to create content. We can't always ask a brand new, fresh question. We just can't. Sometimes there's some redundancy in it. And I do think we tend to overreact sometimes. But I also think this, and I've talked about this issue before, and I think it's because he's an outsider. He didn't grow up in the Northwest, whatever. He's got kind of that East Coast attitude. I think Salk's a pro. I do. But I know people hate him. He has a lot of hate out there. And so it doesn't matter what he asks. People are going to find a reason to criticize it. And I think that's one of the reasons there was so much overreaction from fans.
Yeah, I think you bring up good points here. I think that it's just about you don't get to pull the journalism card where it's convenient for you, right? You don't get to pull the journalism card where it works in your favor, but when it gets hard, then you pull back and you're like, well, I'm not going to be that much of a journalist. You're in it or you're not. Did you get into it to speak truth to power? Did you get into it to try to get to the heart of truth of things? I mean, this is what I've always been told is what usually drives reporters to do this type of thing. And I just don't know that that's the driving force, and you can't serve two masters sometimes. You got to pick a lane. And I think I don't blame folks for their choosing their livelihood. I don't blame folks for not wanting to get access cut off. But I will say that if you're in a New York market, for instance, and you have a head coach that's going to be fired after that year, there's going to be people asking tough questions. There's going to be stories that are going to be ran and multiple times over. And that's really the general usual lay of the land. Doing it differently up here in the Pacific Northwest with a little bit of a softer, we're going to take this, it's a different approach. So it's one that I struggle with because I think you end up towing that line between, am I covering the team or am I an extension of the team?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's tough. And we've seen it. We've seen very recently, we've seen someone try to apply that East Coast flavor and approach to that kind of that shock jock thing, right? We say it backfired horribly for Mark James, right? Just didn't work here. I'm actually kind of surprised that he's still employed. I just don't think long term that approach is going to work here. In New York, absolutely, that's the culture, and it really as a team you can't push back on it because they're all that way, and you can't shut all the media out. You need them for your own, to do your bidding at times yourself. I do think that that there's a reason that we almost never see behind the scenes breaking stories coming out of any of the media that covers the Seahawks. It's just because they're that buttoned up, and they're even Brady Henderson is a pro's pro, right? You don't see many instances concerning the Seahawks where, my sources tell me this is going to happen. My sources, it's usually reaction to Schefter breaking something or Rappaport breaking something, right? Because those guys have connections and they have they're tied in with agents and those guys take care of them first or whatever. It is interesting. And I can't wait to get in there and kind of roll up my sleeves and see what it's like. I mentioned this at the end of a show last week just to test and see how many people watched till the very end. But I'll say it again here with you. I have been granted access the first week of camp this year.
Let's go.
And then at that time, then we'll sit down and meet and get to know them. They'll get to know me, and then they'll make a decision on whether I get full-time access for the season. So I will be in there, in those rooms, in those press conferences, on the practice field, the first few days of training camp. And so, I'll get a much clearer picture of what that vibe is and what it looks like in there. But all those guys are pros, and I like all of them.
Like I said, with Brian Nimhauser, I think he's done a great job going in there. Some of his questions he asked last year were different and way improved from where they've been in recent years, in my opinion. I thought he was a real breath of fresh air. I think Salk at times can be good. I think that you get into some trouble place when I can't tell if you're being honest with me or not. If you're lying to me in this position, we're in trouble. So when he says it's Mariners, when he says it's baseball, when they're asking him at the end of the year, why did it go wrong with the Mariners this year? Why? You've been covering it for 10 years. You know intricately what's going on. You're a baseball guy more than any other thing, right?
Right.
And he goes, it's baseball, and he's lying with every syllable that leaves his mouth in that moment. That's where it's like you're losing credibility, and now you can't wonder why you lose credibility. You're doing it in favor of your clicks. You're doing it in favor to serve that other master, like I say. And it's like, for me, at least when I drive on this, I'm trying to let the process be driven by trying to be most truthful at all times, because I think that's what people value the most in this overall. And I know it's a balanced game, but boy, it's just, he's saying that in that moment. Why, Dan? Why is he saying that? Why is he saying it's just baseball, Dan? Why is he saying that in that report when he knows it's not?
Yeah. And that's also his
but why? Tell me why. Why do you think he's not? Why would he lie in that? Why wouldn't he just say the truth of what it is? We aren't spending enough money. Everyone knows.
Mike Salk is also the program director.
Right.
And he's also paid off of growth and ratings and everything else. He's not just the host. He is the program director.
Well, then the access to the Mariners as well, right? You want your continued access to them. Absolutely. That's also a part of it, right? Like you criticize them and you say they're cheap. And maybe you don't get your access.
He's not the only one. I mean, Adam, Jude, and they're all really good reporters, but they are, and I'm not saying it wasn't a valid point. It is. Jerry DiPoto only makes himself available rarely, as John Schneider only makes himself available from time to time. And the point this guy was making to me was, at the time, this is before Chase Young was called up, and he and Harry Ford were destroying AAA pitching at a time when our lineup was falling apart, and the back end of our lineup looked like a AA lineup at best. That just not competitive week in, week out. We could see the division lead starting to slip away. Nobody was asking Jerry DiPoto, what's the plan with Harry Ford? Why isn't Chase Young up yet? They just kind of let him dictate terms. But it's because they know, because DiPoto's had such a precarious relationship because of some of the decisions he's made and things he said over the last couple of years with the public, and he's wary of how he comes across, that they probably know if they push too hard, they'll stop getting access. And that's a tough kind of, moral dilemma a little bit as a reporter that you walk.
I get it.
In sports more so, I think, than regular journalism, because there's an entertainment aspect to it too. If you're covering politics, you can't not ask the hard questions, because that's the job, right? Yeah.
And I don't expect reporters to be just sitting there, like New York media can go too extreme with us, the other side of it. But I think we can find a happy balance, right? There's two extremes on this, and it's like, let's find at least a little bit of some feet to the fire occasionally when it's granted, when it's true to happen. And for instance, if you have a coach that's going to be fired at the end of the year, that's probably a pretty good time for you to start to drum up some of that journalistic integrity to bring it up to the general masses of like, maybe this is winding down. Maybe this is any other cities, this kind of stories would have been written. And I thought it was a real kind of key indicator point of where the media kind of is locally right now, kind of a snapshot in that vein of things.
And if you're good at your job, just to be clear, if you're good at it, then there's a way to ask the tough questions without pissing the subject off.
Bingo. That's the thing with this, is it's this thing of, well, if I be creative, find the way to a little bit of like preload it, there's ways you can do it, and other than just simply coming out and just, hitting them right between the eyes with it, to where you can get that response out. And I think that's where I think Brian did a good job of that last year with some of those tough questions he was able to ask, and that it wasn't just to come out adversarially. It's to come out trying to get to the more of the truth of the harder of this. It ain't me trying to put you on blast or me to make you look bad in the press conference. It's to get to the truth of things that people are wondering about and have a question on.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There's the New York way of asking a question, which is, why is this guy suck?
Hey.
And then there's, you can provide context before you ask the bulk of the question. As you said, you can preload it. You can say, hey, trends right now in the league are that this or that. Well, why aren't you doing that?
Exactly. Yeah. Just a kind of a fluid way to do it that way. So it's happy medium. Just give me that happy middle ground.
Absolutely. Oh, there's Shane asking the question that hopefully I just answered.
Let's go.
Yeah. We'll know, I don't know, by the second week of camp, I hope. So
let's go. That's awesome. Well, congrats on that, man. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Worst case scenario is I get out there and I get to cover camp, from up close for a couple of days and make a bunch of content out of it and then drive 5 days each way. But it's, but also, I've had enough contact and I have a good rapport with enough people in that organization. They know a little bit about me already, including at some of the highest levels that I think, getting there, they see how I go about my job and the content that I produce. And I'm confident it'll turn into full credentials. So yeah,
I could see it, man. And I know you'll do a great job in there.
There you go, Shane. I was going to ask you a bunch of questions about the rest of the division, but we're already over 2 hours and it's been such a damn good discussion. I think we'll just leave it there.
Can I get one more from you on the, sell me on one more guy I need you to sell me on from this draft that I struggled with? Cause you saw him in person again, which is part of me asking this is I know you got to see him and you got to see him where he drew Seattle in as much to this one, which would be the Arroyo pick.
Yeah.
And that, you liked the pick. You saw at the Senior Bowl what cemented in their mind for this to happen.
I love the player. I love the ceiling, love the upside. He is everything you hear about him, the fluidity, the athleticism. Like he looked like, I called it hyperbole earlier, but that when Schneider said he could play X receiver, some of the scouts thought he could play X. It's true. Like he could line up with the wide receiver group and you wouldn't bat an eye. Right. Really smooth mover. I think he can be an absolutely dynamic offensive weapon as a tight end in this league. The only question is, and the reason that it kind of raised my eyebrows and the reason I was surprised when he was the call at that pick is the injury history and how the Seahawks have been burned by that. Right. And I always think back to the Rashad Penny pick where, Schneider talks about how it was the analytics department that really convinced him to go back and watch the tape again and convinced him that he'd be a solid pick because in the way that they grade durability, he was off the charts and they just didn't see that. They didn't think there was any concerns with him being able to hold up physically in the NFL. And then look what, the story of his career was. He couldn't stay healthy. This is a guy that didn't get on the field full time until 3 or 4 weeks into his last season there. I mean, he hardly played. And so, yeah, that's a big concern. And then, as you said, he got banged up again at the Senior Bowl. If he can be healthy, I think it'll absolutely justify his draft position. And I think coming off a top 50 of all time list that didn't include a single tight end, I think he has an opportunity to have that kind of career that we remember for a long time.
So in a Senior Bowl of other tight ends, he really did stand out then. That
Absolutely.
There was a real...
He and Mason Taylor were head and shoulders above. So much so that I kind of felt like Terrence Ferguson was just a guy.
Yeah, I never quite got onto this Ferguson train.
But then he went to the combine and tested it at an elite level. I didn't see that from him, but I think some of it might be because you watch Taylor run a rep, then you watch Arroyo run a rep, and then you watch Ferguson run a rep.
Yeah, he's more of a yak guy, get him the ball in hands too. He wasn't really a create separation guy as much as that in the Oregon offense. So that makes sense.
Yeah, there were a handful of guys that from the moment that I arrived that were head and shoulders above everybody else. It was Shamar Stewart and what he did in practice Tuesday, Wednesday. It was Gray Zabel. It was Elijah Arroyo. It was Mason Taylor. It was Higgins for me, the receiver from Iowa State. There were a couple of guys that just from the minute you show up, you're like, that guy's a little different.
Yeah.
Trey Amos kind of looked that way too. And then he ducked out after 2 practices because he did enough. And then
He's in the barn.
Darius Alexander, Mike Green, there were a couple of them there that were just like, okay, they're a level above. Wouldn't have surprised me if they would have skipped the game. Now, Arroyo wasn't going to skip the game because he had something to prove. He had to show up. He had to do it because he's got to overcome that injury history. But no, I think his ceiling might be as high as anyone in that class.
I love it, man. I love it. I'm hoping so. It's like you said, the track record on it and just the injury. I get worried with the lack of productivity on that, but team really felt where he was at in the GPS time, 4.53 at that size. Guys at 245 don't run 4.53. So, right. If you've got that with a guy at his size doing that, that in itself is, eye-opening. Real quick on the NFC West, just real fast on that. I think that you have two teams top heavily. Niners have these super easy schedule. None of these teams did anything this offseason, even with the Cardinals and some of their moves to just blow the lid off of anything, in my opinion. I think but both the Niners and Rams are in a trepidatious territory where a couple of injuries, like we saw the Niners last year, a few injuries in the wrong place, you're at the bottom of the division. I think both of those two teams stand on that kind of knife's edge a little bit as it stands here. And whereas the Cardinals have done some things, I think McDonald, in looking at the all-22 tape, I'd be interested to see where you stand on this, but I think that McDonald solved Kyler Murray in the Cardinal offense last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he understands exactly what to do against that team and what forcing Murray to middle of the field looks and reads. I think he's got him in a bag. His pass rush and what he was doing with he'd have Leonard Williams and Reed and he'd have two layers. So he'd have his edges running contain, and then he'd have his defensive tackles running contain, and then he'd run like a double-A gap mug pressure blitz with both of the inside linebackers off the inside with it. Just stuff like that throughout and Leonard whooping. By the way, Evan Brown is coming back to left guard for the Cardinals again. Tell me that Leonard Williams isn't just in there just picking his teeth at that matchup. Yeah. And I go, boy, I think we got the Cardinals. So I like us against this division. I really think the Niners and Rams have put themselves in that position where it's like, this guy goes, that guy goes, you're kind of sunk. And maybe you can pull it off. Maybe you can glide your way through in the top end of the talent can hold. But I like our depth. I like our depth a lot more.
Yeah, I look at the division this way. I don't think any of them had the off seasons that I was afraid they were going to have, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I thought the Rams were going to go out and address their secondary, right, and go heavy corner and get one of the elite. No, they don't. They continue to treat that position like it's almost disposable. The Cardinals, they had an opportunity, for the third year in a row under that regime to add a bunch of talent, and they did, but they added such volatile talent, like real boom bust guys, like Walter Nolan. The talent's undeniable. Is the work ethic? Is the commitment there? Right?
Motor.
Will Johnson, we like obviously the ceiling, but you're talking about a degenerative knee, possibly. There's a reason that he was available in the second round. That could be. I don't think that they added any certainty to their roster, which is what would have worried me the most. And then the 49ers, and I told you I'd come back around to it. This is a good place to finish probably, is you talked about, how they loaded up on the front seven, which they needed to. But how often have we seen teams completely draft a front seven, which essentially is what they did, right? I mean, even Nick Martin's going to play.
That was a horrible pick. Oh, that was so bad.
In place of Dre Greenlaw. They have Nick Bosa back, and then everyone else is new, right? And I like all of those players in a vacuum. I do. I liked Mykel Williams at a certain level. I liked
even Nick Martin. You like Nick Martin?
Not Nick Martin. I'm talking about the lineman. Nick Martin's when he's healthy, he's a good athlete. I don't think he can play linebacker very well. But like
he's itty bitty too. He's a tiny little guy.
Alfred Collins was a guy that I had an eye on. As a guy that could really reunite with Byron Murphy. I like CJ West. They took all those guys. But how often have we seen that? We just talked earlier about how those guys aren't physically mature for a while, right?
Yeah.
And none of them are perfect prospects. You're going to roll that out as your defensive front and try to compete in this division. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work right away. So
especially because the Ayuk trade could still come down the line.
What's that?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you. My bad.
What about Ayuk?
And the Ayuk trade could still be coming down the line because they're not done dumping money, supposedly.
Yeah, it could. And then I do think it's going to be a fascinating matchup week one, in the sense that the Seahawks continuity and chemistry, as we've said, is on defense. The 49ers should be ready to kind of roll week one, like they have enough pieces back on offense. They should be pretty dialed in. But then major question marks about their defense, major question marks with all the changes about our offense. It's going to be a fun matchup.
Do you think they'll have enough pass rush there? I mean, because again, Mykel Williams, I loved a lot, but I think he's going to take some time to come along with pass rush. I think Alfred Collins is a run defending three tech. Yeah. But then you have Saleh coming back. What does Saleh do? Right. He wants to run front four and no blitzes. So, that's where I wonder with them on that, where it's like, you don't have the front four you did a couple years ago when it was DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Bosa on one side, depth behind the guys. You could roll them out. Not the same way now.
No, I'm not scared by anything they did there. And just I guess from a Seahawks perspective, it's a fortunate thing that they were managing their cash so much this offseason, because what would have made all the sense in the world, and they've done this in the past, and they've kind of been burned by some of their signings, but if they had added like a legitimate veteran somehow in the middle of that line, I would have felt a lot more trepidatious about what that matchup was going to look like. But you're going to roll all those young guys out there and guys with questions in their game, like that might not be a bad week one matchup for our offensive line who we're trying to put together, right?
Not at all. Well, then, and Ayuk's not going to be ready week one. I can almost guarantee you he's going to be out week one. So you're walking Jennings and
just a clean ACL tear. That was stuff.
It was the full meal deal, dude, right? It was like MCLs and all the L's and like maybe a meniscus in there too on top of it. Like it was rolled. It was tough. Let's go, me.
Always appreciate me.
Let's go, buddy.
If that sounds weird to you, if you're listening to the audio version of this, if that sounds weird, there's a commenter who refers to himself as me. So yeah, I'm not speaking third person here.
Thank you, me. You're awesome, brother.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Hopefully I'll hit it out of the park. I'm sure I'm a little rusty, but it was interesting going back to first day back in Mobile, right? Quick little story. The Monday before practice starts at the Senior Bowl, they have a press conference, and Jim Nagy, who's moved on now, I honestly cannot think of the name of the guy who replaced him now, but I'll get to know it. And then they bring out a quarterback from each team. It was Jalen Milroe this year, and it was Dylan Gabriel, right? So it's a little press conference. I got there early. I was front and center, sitting in the first row. But I remember walking into that conference room thinking, I haven't done this in 30 years, like at this level, right? Like I've done this, but I haven't been in a press conference, had to raise my hand, ask a question, pressure, everybody watching you. Who the hell is that guy? I had a little bit of imposter syndrome kind of going on when I walked in. Like, still do this. But then, immediately it's like the muscle memory, it all snaps back. I actually, right out of the gate, I think I asked the first question for all three of them, like just took advantage of my spot up there. So I'm sure it'll come around. And also, like I said, a lot of familiarity, right? Like I've visited with Coach before and John many times, and I know a lot of those other media guys. So I'm sure it'll feel pretty comfortable. Yeah.
It'll be duck to water, Ryan. I'm sure you'll do great with it, and you'll ask some good questions, which I love about you being in there, because it's one more person asking good questions, which is just all the better, because then we can get a little more truth. We can understand things a little more clear. We got folks out there asking. It doesn't have to be hard questions, just good questions. They get, rather than, like, what are you doing in your bye week, Mike? Like, can we, let's, how about football questions?
What's your favorite potato chip?
Yeah, exactly. Like, please, no more of that.
Ritz or Wheat Thins?
No one cares. I want to know where our nose tackle's coming from.
Let's see here. Oh, and Star got on for you too.
Go me.
Let's
go, brother.
Of these
You're the best, man. I appreciate you.
Doing well, mate. Wait, is me Australian also?
No, I don't know for sure. I do not know.
He just used the word mate. Me, are you from down under also? I should introduce you and Shane.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, me. You're awesome for doing that.
That would.
And he's dropped some big dogs on me before, so
yeah.
Very kind of you, man. Hold on. Well, wait. Hold on. I got my little thing here too. So I got my little thing here. And it's important. It's very important here, Dan.
So you feel me? Start taking care of y'all mentals, y'all bodies, and y'all chicken.
Chicken. Take care of the chicken. The mentals.
Ahead of those mentals.
Speaking of taking care of the mentals, let's finish on this. How do you plan to navigate these next 5 weeks before training camp actually gets started? 6 weeks when everybody disperses and topics are harder to come by.
Yeah, I'm actually going to do a little bit of a break. So I'm going to go through this month. I've got some daily shows set up, covering some various items, looking at guys like Kobe Bryant, who's really underappreciated the year that he's had and what he's done, what he brings to the table. Looking at Woolen season and a little bit of trying to go through, here's the story of what's going on. A little bit like what you and I talked about, but in more of an expansive looking at the film on it with him too. Getting through some of these things, and then getting to the kind of the middle to end of the month, and then just taking a couple weeks there and then hitting the refresh button, because it's going to be I know it's going to be even every year. It seems like there's a couple more shows to add on top. So it ends up being like you get to 12, 13 shows a week and you're just like, oh my goodness. So you got to catch that breath. I mean, that's the thing that it's definitely, if you don't, you're going to burn out on it. And you want to strike while the iron's hot too, which is just looking when it comes out late June, July, people just are checked out, and you can push out content. You can try to generate stuff, but at the end of the day, people are out there on vacation. It's Pacific Northwest. They're not tapped in, which is understandable. I mean, we only get sun for like 2.5 months a year. You got to get while the getting's going. Good.
Yeah, I try to take opportunities, take a day or two here and there, and always try and tie him up with same time my fiance's off. But I'll like when I see him coming, because I wish I could just take 2 weeks off after minicamp, but can't do little stack shows sometimes, so I can kind of release him a couple days out. But my approach the next 6 weeks will be twofold. One is just guests. It's just a lot more fun for me to have a conversation like this one, but also pick people's brains. And so that way, even though I'm asking many of the same questions and concepts of people, getting different opinions, different outlooks on them. And the viewers seem to appreciate that, because those episodes always seem to do much better. And then also it struck me a couple of weeks ago during a live stream, actually, as I was telling some stories, to just do that and be a storyteller and just focus. I'm going to start with Derek Hall and do an episode and piece it together just on his story. I don't think people really understand the backstory of where he came from and growing up, some of the challenges he and his family faced and to where he is today, and then the player he could become and do some of that stuff. I might have Chris Clough on in a couple of weeks. I've had Chris on many times. He used to cover the Seahawks as a beat reporter for 10 years, I think. But he also wrote a couple of books about the Seahawks, and they're just storytelling books. And so just have him on and tell some of those favorite stories, right? Get some ex-players, guys that have been on the show before, and just have them tell stories about training camp, some of their favorite memories, that kind of thing. So,
I'd love to be able to bring on more former players. They're very elusive.
They're
those folks. They are hard to bring in, and it's like there's so many great questions you could potentially ask them that are just a lot of fun. I wish they were a little more open, but they're hard to pin down once they get retired.
They are. And I've had more of them tell me they'll come on the show, give me their contact information, and then just never commit than I've had. That happens a lot too. That happens more than they actually come on the show. So just so you guys know, I'm always working it, always trying to get new guests.
I can attest to it. I've had many I've sent out to. They're hard. You can't blame them. They're multimillionaires retired a lot of times. Like, I'm chilling on this beach. I'm good.
Yeah. Right. And some of them just don't like to revisit it. Don't like to talk about it as much. Some people maintain their passion for the sport they used to play when their playing days are over, and others move on.
Yeah, true. And it's sometimes bad at tough ends. You don't want to think about it. It's like an X or something, I think, for some of them. So I agree. Yeah, it's a little bit.
I'll put this out there. I'm trying like hell. We're Facebook friends, and I still can't get this guy to message me back. I want Justin Britt on my show so damn bad. And a big part of it is I want to talk to him about his career. Certainly, I thought his career here was fascinating and his whole career arc. He's a good dude, but I don't know if you've been keeping up with him, but he's become like an avid runner now.
Okay.
After he's going to run the Chicago Marathon next month, like he has slimmed down. He looks like if he came back now, he'd play tight end. So if any of you know Justin Britt or are in contact with him, and say, hey, get back to Dan. I've messaged it. He accepted me as a Facebook friend, but he just won't. He won't respond, man.
You got to get him in there. Yeah, you got to do this. Come on, man. Come on, Miss Britt. We want to hear from you, bro. And there's so many good stories. There's so many questions. I mean, just even like questions like, give me the you got God story, or you got the, you got, when was your welcome to the NFL moment, or when's the moment when somebody did a dirty thing to you? Because a lot of times, like I was able to do this with Chad Brown, you can go back and then find the reference of the play on YouTube. And so then you can have him speaking and play the actual clip. And it's so cool, those kind of things, if you can get them. But
yeah, one of my favorite things to ask athletes, current or former, is just like, who's the best guy you went up against or played with? And a lot of times it's an answer you'd never expect. It's a practice squad guy, or it's a guy that was kind of a bubble player, or never made a Pro Bowl, but just
how about Jason Kelsey a couple of weeks ago bringing up Puna forward on the tough guys for him to block, and he brings up Puna as like the length and the undersized thing. So it's they're just little cool things you can also learn about that game, and them describing why this guy to that, why this, and it always does. It's a great part about the sport is you're always learning and picking up new stuff along the way. You're never in a sort of stagnant point where it's you kind of learned everything, and now you're just kind of watching it. And where it's like baseball, it's just like, well, there's no same game played over. Every game's unique and has something that's happened you've never seen happen. But football is different in that way.
Speaking of Puna, wouldn't he have been the perfect signing this offseason to add to that mix?
He's a little bit like Jaron. He's made the transition to 3-tech and he never looked back. And Jaron was the same way in a lot of ways, right? Where he made the 3-tech change and then never looked back. And even last year, I feel like with Jaron, he's done a little nose tackle stuff, but you've kept him in the first 2 years back in the 3-tech role because you're like, it's just the player he's become. And I think if you were to take Puna Ford and put him at nose tackle 24/7 versus the Puna Ford that was at nose tackle when it first came in, I think don't you feel like a different measurable degree of
he's
performance difference?
He's always been one of my favorite players. I want to look this up. How many years has he been in the league now? Is this 8? Like year 8?
7 or 8, something like that.
Let me see here.
That's also one spot with the Rams, though. I think that this is where they're very weak to me, is that up the middle with their linebackers, inside linebackers, very weak, very weak. And then you look at them, they dumped Bobby Brown, the one nose tackle they really had on the roster last year. Kobe Turner is more of a tweener and more of a 3-tech. Braden Fisk is nothing but a 3-tech and a pass rushing 3-tech at that. And now with Puna Ford, you brought another 3-tech.
I love Braden Fisk, but he's still a guy you can run at. Like, I'm not shying away from you can
all day. That evaluation of him, look, the Rams did the perfect thing with how to use him as a pass rusher, because they're also not just go up and beat your guy heads up. It's all that loop and stunt and loop and stunt. But his run defend grades are atrocious because he's got 31-inch long arms and he's undersized. Yeah. He's going to get swallowed up. So you go with what they're going to do is they're going to be rocking out 2 3-tech super light with those light boxes. We come back to just running the power AB gap runs into that and testing him. I'm going to test Puna if he's bracking back the nose tackle. Are you going back there? Yeah. Are you more concerned with getting upfield, or are you going to get back to 2 gapping and sitting down now? Are you in that mode, or are you getting upfield mode? And so much of what that Rams line is trying to do is just get upfield, which then opens up holes on the backside when you're just trying to constantly shoot the gaps. You might look pretty and get in the backfield, but you just ran yourself out of the play. And if you have a team that's dedicated to run the ball, you got them. So that's what real weakness the Rams I see to me. Don't you feel the same way, or do you think that they're going to find a way around it?
No, I do. Yeah, I think that's one of the, they're going to be a tough team to pass protect against, but I think you can run against them. I think that's got to be the approach. He's entering his 8th season, Puna Ford is. And the reason I wanted to look that up, and certainly at this point in his career, I don't think there's any reason to think that he won't play 10 years now. In fact, was it a 2-year deal that he just signed with the Rams? So that'll at least get him through year 9. I just remember Tom Herman, who was his head coach at Texas, coming on local radio after he was signed as an undrafted free agent. And this is before camp or anything else when we knew he was going to make the roster. And he said, not only is this guy going to make the roster, he's going to play for 10 years in this league. I'm telling you right now. And that stuck with me. And I've always filed it away. And he was right.
I remember the quote from him as well. And I want to add on top of that, you hear a lot of people that like to try to pick that quote apart at times when you're describing draft prospects. And I would argue he's one of the exact reasons why you shouldn't pick that apart when you make that evaluation about a guy. Because it is saying something. It's okay. Is he a star? Is he going to be a bust? This guy's going to be an above average player in this league and to give you a good 10-year run out of it. He won't ever get into that spot where he's really scratching the surface of the stardom point, but man, he's going to be a good player and he'll play 10 years. And I've seen some scout draft nicks, that'll push back on that. What does it really mean? What does that even really mean? To me, it means something. It does have a quantifiable kind of backtracking to what you're trying to say with that it unpacks a lot to say it just within that phrase, a 10-year starter to me. But you're right. I remember that quote and it's proven absolutely correct. And you knew he was one of those, there are these undrafted rookie free agents that can come in that you can feel a little bit. Bobo coming in, you felt a little bit good about. Like Holani last year, you felt a little bit good about. I know you saw nothing out of Ivy at the Senior Bowl, but man, I do like Ivy's tape quite a bit out of that Ole Miss's defense.
He's growing on me. And the reason I think it was a disconnect in what my expectations were. I think because of the name and just all the guys they had on defense there at Ole Miss, I just expected to see more twitch out of him, but that's not his game. And the more I listen to other people who are informed and watch the tape and read about how he looks even now, I think we got a steal there, undrafted. I will say this to piggyback on your point, because I think it's a really, really important one. We talk all the time. We've done it tonight. I think every time we've talked, we've discussed in some way, shape, or form the concept of how many stars do you have? How many blue chippers do you have? And to be a true Super Bowl contender, you have to approach double digits. We did a thing 2 off seasons ago, I think, where we counted kind of our opinions of blue chip players in the NFC West. And far and away, the 49ers had the most. It was like 11 or 12 that most people would agree are blue chip players. The Seahawks had like 2 or 3. Not enough, right? But you have to have those guys that never made a Pro Bowl or might just make one once in a while. The Pro Bowl isn't what it used to be as far as, guys bow out or whatever. Great example, the top 50 all-time team. Chris Gray made the top 50 all-time team, never made a Pro Bowl, played 10 years in the league. Perfect example of what we're talking about. You have to have guys like that on your roster. There's a player on this roster right now. He's entering into his 3rd season. When he was drafted, he was a day 3 draft pick. I'm giving you too many hints. I'm going to have you guess. But my scouting report on him was at the time was he might never make a Pro Bowl in his career, but I think he's a solid 10-year starter. Who do you think I was talking about?
This is 3 years ago draft?
Yeah. Well, yeah, entering into his 3rd year.
Oh, he's entering into his 3rd year now.
Never make a Pro Bowl, most likely, but can be a very serviceable starting, solid player for 10 years. I've said this about him many times, so I'm not making this up.
No, I believe you on it. Wouldn't have been, so it's not the Kobe Bryant draft, be the draft after, right? The Woolen draft after the year with that. Okay.
Yeah,
so I'm blanking out on my date. Oluwatimi. There we go.
That's what I think his profile is. I do. I think Jalen Sundell's ceiling might be higher, and he might ultimately be the guy there. The athletic ability is certainly better, but that's what I see from Oluwatimi, a guy that every year fans are going to want to replace, but he just goes out there and takes his lunch pail to work every day and does a solid job.
Well, to your point, so he went out to PFF last year, came out with basically right around a league average grade. And if you're getting the guy in the 5th round that gives you league average play from the center position, there's a use for that in this league. That's the type of guy, to your point, that can play 10 years in this league. And I could see the same thing with Oluwatimi, the way that this plays out with him. So he's a guy that absolutely can play. He's not going to be a difference maker, but he doesn't necessarily have to be a difference maker in this. Just be the leader on that line, be the communicator on that line,
right?
Get everybody in the right place, and be at least that league average as your floor. Maybe give us a little bit beyond that, but at least get to league average. We've got the pillars at tackle that can make it happen. We got a lot of talent at the guards. They just got to pop. The talent's there. And if he can just kind of motor through on that, I think that's fine. You can have a perfectly fine offense with him in there, making it go. So yeah, I agree.
It's okay for a player to not be a star. It's okay. But we live in this culture now where it's like, if you're not a star, then you suck.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
A good example of that is we talked a lot about Christian Haynes tonight. And while I think the best thing for this team is if he establishes himself as a starter at right guard, I don't think he's a slam dunk 10-year starter. I think he's a guy that even if he seizes the job this year and plays well enough for that line to be competent and functional, he's still a guy that you're probably looking to upgrade at some point, right? Either with a big free agent signing or a guy like Bryce Cable who's a much better athlete and a longer player, to maybe once he develops, maybe take over there, right? So it's okay to just be a good player.
100%, especially because between those two guys, not Cable but Oluwatimi may not have enough athleticism that you're exactly looking for in this scheme, but he's got enough. He can run in every scheme. I think we learned about Haynes last year that it's got to be probably in a zone scheme only for him to find success.
All right, man. I think that's it. Let me see. I just want to make sure, see if we missed anybody on the stars. Nope. Thanks to everyone for contributing and donating, and the super thanks, the super chat. Always great to chop it up with you, man. I hope you make it through the next 6 weeks. Enjoy your downtime.
Got a good plan for it. That's the key. He's got to have a good plan for it. Otherwise, you'll be like, where is everybody at?
Are you? Do you come over and hop into a couple of training camp practices every year? Or
I do. Yeah. So I've been looking, the training camp dates. Have they been announced yet? Because I keep going to the site and it says they haven't. Man, they're waiting their happy ass off on that one, aren't they? Yeah. I'm gonna get there for. I think I'm gonna get there for a couple of days of training camp and then try to get there for the scrimmage game at the end. So I'm definitely planning on flying in and doing that. So we should certainly connect.
Absolutely, 100%.
I'll be on the other side of the fence.
Something Bryce and I have talked about a little bit is a few years ago I did a live training camp preview show. We did it at Aussie's. This was a bar in Lower Queen Anne that I actually used to manage, and it was me and Bill Alstad, Keith Myers from the Seahawks Playbook, and Corbin showed up, and we set it up and we live streamed it, and everything was great. It went on for 3 hours, right up your alley. And so already having those conversations this year with, Corbin popping in, Bryce, if you're over there, the owner of Dino's, the infamous, and well, it's not infamous, it's famous, watering hole, which is right across Highway 405 from the VMAC. Technically it's Renton, but it's just kind of a little strip mall down there. It's one of John Schneider's favorite hangouts, and where famously last year the news broke that Ryan Grubb was the hired offensive coordinator because someone spotted McDonald, Schneider, and Grubb all drinking beers there. I know the owner really well. I used to work for him and actually helped him open up the bar, his first bar, and help it be a success that led to him being able to get Dino's. Now he has 5 locations. Oh, no. And so I just think that would be really cool if we did like a remote, like a show from there.
I'm going to be at I'll be at the hotel that's right there next door. So
there you go.
If you want to set it up there, that'll be right down. I'll be able to walk to you guys right next door. So I'm totally down for that.
We'll figure something
Sign me
out.
up. 100%.
Also, for those of you that enjoy the crossover, Brandon and I have talked about going to the Senior Bowl together next year as well and working together.
Going to try to pull that off if we can. I think there's a good chance of it. So yeah, we should get that locked in.
All right, man. Thanks to all of you. Do all the following and supporting. Everything's down in the description, all of that. And if you're with me and you don't follow Brandon yet, subscribe to his channel, do all that, take care of all that, do all the things. We appreciate it.
Same thing to my side, to Dan, of course, Seahawks Forever on his side of it. And me, thank you for those big monster donations too. And all of you guys for all the support today. You guys are just amazing as ever.
Good job, me. I love me.
I love me too. And I love me some me as well.
All right. Thanks, you guys. We're going to wrap this up. Thanks, Brandon.
Go Hawks, guys.